owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Puremont para Intratnamiento Wino Infringe de Recos de Originales. Los Direcos de la Novela y la Imagen son del otro original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 826 The cows are going to plow the fields. After hanging up Chain Mew's phone call, Kinzu lay on the sofa and thought quietly. He was thinking, is this extra-large mantis shrimp an accidental creation, or is it a species that already exists in the ocean? What if it is detected that this mantis shrimp is extremely high nutritional value, but where can he get it? No, let's go to the sea to have a look at night. Touching his chin, Kinzu made up his mind. Holding the mobile phone in his hand, Kinzu was about to call back the phone number in China, but was interrupted by a sudden voice next to him. What are you thinking about, so absent-minded? Kinwan didn't know when, she had already sat next to Kinzu, looking at him with a smile. Nothing. Kinzu smiled when he came back to his senses, and seeing that she seemed to be hesitant to speak, he asked, "What's wrong?" "Sister, just say whatever you want to say." Kinwan smiled a little embarrassedly, turned her head to look at her parents, but found that the two old people were watching TV honestly. Helpless, Kinwan had to organize her words, and then she said, "Xiao's you see, we have been here for so long, but we haven't really visited the United States. When will you have time to take us out for a walk?" Kinzu heard this and patted his head in annoyance. "Sister, if you hadn't said it, I would have forgotten it." Kinzu was not pretending, he really forgot about it. There was no way, he himself was not the kind of person who liked to go shopping. And the beautiful lady's without Kinzu's company, she didn't like to go shopping alone. So, usually the two of them stayed at the ranch, even if they went to the supermarket, they would come back as soon as they went. But now it's different, my parents and my sister's family are all coming to the United States for the first time, we can't just let them stay at the ranch, right? In this case, when they return, their family members will ask, "What did you do in America?" The parents answered, "We stayed at the ranch." "What's there in the ranch?" "There are cows, sheep, horses." Kinzu shook his head violently, threw away the picture in his mind, raised his head, looked at Kinwan, and said with a smile, "I was not thoughtful enough. Let's do this. Starting tomorrow, I will accompany you to have a good tour in America." No. Kinwan waved her hands repeatedly, "If you have something to do, just do your own thing. Our mother's idea is to let Yo accompany us for a tour. No problem, she will accompany me, and I will accompany her." Kinzu did not give his sister a chance to refuse, and decided to do it. Are you kidding? What is there for him to do? The whole family went out to play, leaving him alone at home to bask in the sun. He won't do it. When it was evening, the whole family was still watching TV, and Kinzu took the blushing beauty's upstairs. Kin's father and mother looked at it, said nothing, and continued to watch TV. Kinwan and Li Jianhua looked at each other, turned their heads and looked at each other, and also went upstairs hand in hand. Tongton and Lily looked at each other and were about to follow, but were stopped by Kin's father and mother. "Little guys, come and watch TV with Grandma and Grandpa." Kinru also saw it, but turned her head back calmly, but her face was a little red. After all, she was a little girl of 15 or 16 years old, and she understood everything she should understand. Even Daha and Xiaohe, who were napping on the side, saw it. When they saw their owner going upstairs, they followed him with their tails between their legs. However, they were depressed when they reached the door of the bedroom. The door was closed. Helplessly, the two little guys looked at each other, shook their little heads and slipped back. And seeing the two little friends come back in dejection, Dahu and Xiao, who had not followed to join in the fun, were happy. The meaning was very clear. See, the flattery hit the horse's leg, right? The four little guys were making a mess here, but they accidentally woke up Betty, who was sleeping soundly. This guy was dazed and didn't know what happened. He just saw that several friends seemed to be fighting. He didn't care about anything and stretched out his two claws to pull them apart. However, he overestimated his ability. The two claws were stretched out, but the strength was not strong enough. Not only did he fail to separate the others, but he also got himself trapped. Now, several guys are making a mess, and it's so lively. After a while, Tongton and Lily were attracted to it. The two little guys were not afraid of trouble and cheered on the side. Fortunately, these guys have their limits and didn't really fight. Even if they were bitten by the other party, they just let go. According to Kinzu's words, you are not gentlemen. If you fight, you must use your hands, but don't use your mouth. Whoever dares to use his mouth will be hung on the wall to feed the big turtle. Although the little guys didn't know what a big turtle was, they were not allowed to talk, so they all remembered it. There was no way, just because he bit Betty, the big tiger was hung on a tree by one leg and starved for 3 days. Even the white tiger didn't dare to feed him secretly, so he starved to death. It was a bloody lesson, so don't think that the little guys were having fun fighting, but it was all you scratched me and I slapped you. Great, I can't beat you, I'll press you down and rub you, rubbing you so that you can't move. Ahem, this is really not taught by Kinzu. If he wants to rub, he will only rub women, not a male. In the bedroom on the 2nd floor, after the clouds stopped and the rain stopped, the beautiful Zyu nestled in Kinzu's arms, and said with some dissatisfaction, "It's all your fault. Now it's good. How can I go out and meet people tomorrow?" In response, Kinzu just smiled. He was still immersed in the wonderful touch and couldn't extricate himself. Waving his hands nonchalantly, Kinzu put his face close to the beautiful Zyu and said with a wicked smile, "Wife, what's wrong with this? We're already an old couple, what are you afraid of? Who is an old couple to you?" After being said by Kinzu, the beautiful Zyu immediately refused, twisted in Kinzu's arms, and said dissatisfiedly, "We are not even married, how can we be considered an old couple?" Kinzu was happy in his heart, and looked down. Sure enough, in the quilt, the beautiful Zyu, with her white jade-like shoulders exposed, was looking at him expectantly. "What's the matter? We are not married, so why don't we get married?" After hearing the answer she wanted, the beautiful Zyu's beautiful big eyes suddenly narrowed into a slit, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. However, she snorted very proudly. "Humph, who would want to marry you, a big stupid cow?" "Oh, really?" Kinzu stretched out his hand and pinched her upturned little nose, grinning and said, "It's okay to be stupid, as long as you're a cow. Come, the cow is going to plow the field." "Ah, what are you doing, woo-hoo?" Chapter 827 Night Exploration of the Undersea Sea. The night gradually became darker. The somewhat lazy moon girl seemed to be absent-minded tonight. She hung diagonally in the sky, but it did not work. In the ranch, the youngest cattle, who had a full meal for a day, gradually fell asleep and began to digest today's harvest. Of course, this was also to prepare for a full meal tomorrow. In the extremely luxurious mansion on the ranch, a room on the 2nd floor was still faintly revealing some sound. For a long time, until the moon girl could not stand the harassment of this sound, quietly hid in the clouds, and completely disappeared, the sound in the room gradually became smaller. After a while, after a refreshing battle, Kinzu, who was comfortable and in a clear mood, reached out to help Zumengyo, who had fallen asleep, pull the quilt. Under the orange-yellow desk lamp, the little face of the beautiful Zyu, wet with sweat, looked particularly attractive. Even though Kinzu had just gone through several fierce battles, he couldn't help swallowing his saliva and couldn't help wanting to pounce on her and take another bite. However, seeing that she was sleeping soundly and that he had been tossing her a little too hard today, Kinzu calmed down and stopped tossing her. After reaching out to help the beautiful Zyu cover the quilt, Kinzu used his strong will to lie down and close his eyes. However, Kinzu didn't sleep. He transferred his thoughts directly to cheese. Tonight, he still had a mission. When Kinzu opened his eyes again, it was already pitch black in front of him. However, this dark environment was really a piece of cake for him now. After moving his huge body, Kinzu did a warm-up exercise first, and then began to look at the surrounding environment. Well, there was no need to look at anything else. Just looking at the group of sea snakes circling around him, Kinzu knew that he was in his old nest. Speaking of this old nest, Kinzu was also very curious. Because this nest was found by Cheese himself. Moreover, it is not far from his fishing ground. More importantly, this is actually an island. Yes, a pure natural island. Well, that's not right. Because this island, when it is at its largest, is less than 2 square kilometers, and it is bare and has nothing on it. Sometimes, when there is a high tide, it will be directly submerged. Fortunately, these guys are aquatic animals, so they are not afraid of flooding. In addition, this place is not far from the fishing ground, but it will not be discovered by the people in the fishing ground. So, they settled here with a nest of big and small snakes. The most important thing is that the terrain here is really good. Around the island, there are marine plants such as seaweed and kelp, which can provide them with good cover. At this time, Kinzu slowly moved out from a large area of seaweed. There is no way, if he doesn't come slowly, he will make a mess of this seaweed with such a big guy, right? Especially since there are many of his men here. If one of them is accidentally crushed to death by a rollover, it would be a big loss. Slowly moving out of the seaweed, Qinzu identified the direction and swam quickly towards the fishing ground not far away. Just after entering the fishing ground, before he could start to move, he was bumped into by Yingguang, who followed the smell. I don't know if it's because of the nutrition, but now Yingguang is more than one circle bigger than when he first started. The body, which was only more than 1 meter long, is now more than 2 meters long. If the tail is included, it is close to 3 meters. And its pair of fleshy wings is different from other manta rays. The fleshy wings of other manta rays are usually flesh-colored, which doesn't look very good. But Yingguang is different. Just like its name, it exudes a silver-white metallic luster. From a distance, it looks like the legendary UFO floating on the sea, so dazzling. Fortunately, it is still small now, otherwise Qinzu would really worry that this guy would be photographed by the ubiquitous satellite in the sky. After meeting Qinzu, Yingguang seemed particularly happy and kept circling around Cheese. Qinzu was a little confused at this time. Did this guy know that it was him inside, or was it because he and Cheese had such a good relationship now? However, this was not the focus of his attention now. After rubbing the little guy with his big tail and expressing his goodwill, Qinzu twisted his body and began to go to the deep water. Yingguang did not leave, just like a naughty child, following Qinzu all the time, and wandering around from time to time, making the seawater a little turbid. Although Qinzu was helpless, he had no good way. After chasing it away twice, he could only let it follow. The night was as dark as ink, and even the seabed at night was darker than usual. However, this is all relative. It is precisely because the seabed is dark that colorful little fish are born and various coral reefs exist. If the deep sea is like the shallow sea area, and sunlight can penetrate into it for a long time, Qinzu believes that there will not be so many legends about the ocean in the world. After a while of random thoughts, Qinzu's speed gradually began to slow down. Because he remembered that the place where he caught the mantis shrimp last time was not very far from here. You ask how it remembers? Animal instincts cannot be explained. When he lowered his head, Qinzu turned his head and looked at the silver light beside him, and couldn't help grinning. Little guy, you didn't go and I asked you to go at the beginning, so don't go now. The tail pulled the little guy back. Qinzu talked to the duck, and with Qinzu's communication of thoughts, the silver light finally understood his mission. To Qinzu's surprise, this guy not only did not feel that he was drafted, but was very happy. Shaking his head helplessly, Qinzu ignored this guy, sank his body to the bottom of the sea, and began to search slowly. The purpose of his coming today was to find those mantis shrimps and see if he could find their nest. At the very least, he had to find their base camp. In other words, figure out whether they are unique mutants or just a common species that exists in the ocean. After all, this is related to an important income in the future, and Qinzu couldn't help but pay attention to it. After swimming slowly on the seabed for a while, Qinzu was surprised to find that his fishing ground seemed to have changed a lot. Chapter 828 Baby, so many baby. Yes, Qinzu felt that his fishing grounds seemed to have changed. Moreover, the change was not small. Apart from other things, he had never seen the coral reefs in front of him. Qinzu did not dare to say that he knew this sea area very well, but he probably had some understanding. Really, he had never seen such a large coral reef in front of him. How big? According to Qinzu's visual estimation with his python head raised, the area of this coral reef group was as large as 2 or 3 football fields. That's not all. In this huge coral reef group, not only are the coral reefs generally larger, but even some of the water plants growing in them are much more lush. What's going on? Qinzu scratched his head. Is this also one of the benefits of the fishing ground? However, turning his head to look at the silver light beside him, it seemed that he was not affected at all, so Qinzu had to suppress his doubts. Twisting his huge body, Qinzu followed the silver light and went directly into the huge coral reef group. As soon as he entered, Qinzu's eyes were a little blurry. He felt that he didn't enter a coral reef, but more like accidentally breaking into the legendary Dragon Palace in the East China Sea. What he saw was a dazzling scene. Among the colorful coral reefs, the white sand beach and the gleaming pebbles were full of color. And the sea was drifting with the waves, and the various colorful and strange-shaped small fish interspersed among them added infinite vitality to this coral reef. Snap! As if disturbed by Qinzu's arrival, a black shell the size of a wash basin in front of it snapped and closed its half-open shell. But in just such a moment, Kinzu still found a touch of different color. Gold. At the moment when the shell closed, Kinzu saw a golden bead. Even if he didn't think about it, Kinzu would not think it was artificially synthesized. If it wasn't artificially synthesized, what else could it be? Natural golden pearls. Not only that, Kinzu turned his head and looked around. Wow, Kinzu found more than 10 black-lipped clams in just a small area in front of him. I'm rich, Kinzu's saliva was almost flowing out. As long as these black-lipped clams are left in the fishing ground, even if the mantis shrimps are not found today, this trip will not be in vain. However, these guys can't run away now. Kinzu didn't care about them anymore, but turned his head and changed direction, and continued to swim forward. After passing several coral reefs of different shapes, Kinzu slowly came to the center of this coral reef. But here, Kinzu did not find that big boss he imagined. Scratching his head, Kinzu smacked his big mouth with some regret. It seems that novels are really a lie. Logically speaking, shouldn't the central area be where the big boss stays? Since he didn't find it, Kinzu didn't stay any longer. He flicked his tail, turned his head and swam in another direction. However, what he didn't find was that two faint lights suddenly lit up at the place he just left. After turning two corners and bypassing some strange-looking coral reefs, Kinzu had to float up and stay away from the seabed. Why? Because he found another treasure. TSK, today is really a treasure hunting day. Shaking his head and sighing, Kinzu's copper-like eyes stared at the front without blinking. There is a small forest. Of course, this is not the legendary underwater forest. These small forests are composed of coral stones of various colors and sizes. Some are 2 meters tall, with lush branches and look very realistic. Some are half a meter tall, with strange shapes, and you can't tell what a tree looks like. Among them, the most eye-catching are the 2 coral trees that are more than 2 meters tall. One is red, dazzling red, and the bright red looks as if it is about to drip out of the coral. One is colorful, and looks like a rainbow after the rain, compressed directly on the seabed, which is so shocking. And these are not the most eye-catching parts of them. The reason why these 2 coral trees are so shocking is that they have lush branches and leaves. Just like a real big tree, there are countless tiny branches on the straight trunk, which look exactly like branches. For this reason, Kinzu activated the function of his backpack without saying a word. He carefully extended his thoughts and directly wrapped them around the 2 coral trees. Kinzu put them into the storage space together with the sand underneath. Only when he saw the 2 small trees lying quietly in the storage space did Kinzu breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he braked quickly just now. If he had just run over them, wouldn't all these treasures have been wasted? Kinzu looked at the remaining coral trees reluctantly and turned away. It's not that he didn't want to catch them all. However, with these 2 perfect trees in hand, Kinzu now looked at the rest and felt a little bit disappointed. Moreover, he still had a kind of extravagant hope. That is, leave these here. What if they grow into 2 perfect coral trees next time? Kinzu was still a little excited after leaving the coral reefs for a long time. He was so happy today. The seabed was just like a huge treasure house, waiting for his exploration. After swimming for a while, Kinzu suddenly found a dark shadow in front of him, attacking him at lightning speed. With a roll, Kinzu moved more than 10 meters horizontally. After stopping, he was a little stunned. Hey, are you okay? In the place where he just stayed, there was a silver white tail floating in the seawater and swaying left and right. Just looking at the tail, Kinzu knew who the idiot who had sunk into the sand was. Sure enough, as the sand on the seabed surged, the small tail gradually became thicker. Then, the white body came. Good guy, the manta ray has no hands or limbs. Now it is relying on its own body strength to retrieve a little bit. Kinzu was watching anxiously, and wanted to help. But after moving his body, he found that he couldn't help. He smacked his mouth and pulled it out. However, Kinzu looked at the tiny tail and wondered in his heart, if he took a bite, would the little tail still exist? Kinzu was still thinking, and the familiar figure had retreated from the sand little by little. Chapter 829. Surrounded by silver light, shaking his flat little head and spitting out the sand that he accidentally swallowed, Yingguang looked at the big guy in front of him with some grievance. Is there anyone like you? People worked hard to help you find something, and after finding it, they wanted to come over to celebrate with you. Why are you hiding? I don't care. You hurt my young heart. I won't get up if you don't give me something delicious. Thinking of this, Yingguang lay down on the seabed, staring at Qinzu with his little eyes, and began to play rogue. Qinzu found it a little funny. After waiting for a while, seeing that this guy didn't mean to get up, he used his big tail to poke it. As a result, this guy not only didn't get up, but also turned over with this force and continued to pretend to be dead. Qinzu had no choice but to find food for this guy. Turning his head and looking around, he saw a group of sea-based women by not far away. Qinzu thought, I'll take you as the first choice, but you must not blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame the greedy little guy. Bored thoughts flashed in his mind, but Qinzu's movements were not slow. The big tail exerted force on the seabed, and the huge body turned over in the sea, rushing towards the sea-based school like lightning. This group of sea base is probably a small school of fish, and the number is not too large, probably a few thousand. Indeed, in the fishing grounds, a few thousand sea base belong to a small school of fish. After all, those large schools of cod can easily be tens of millions. With a pounce, Qinzu pierced through the school of fish. The sea base that were suddenly attacked immediately scattered like birds and beasts, and fled in panic. Some guys, unlucky, actually came directly towards Qinzu. Qinzu was so angry, I kindly let you go, why don't you appreciate it? Although he was angry, Qinzu still let these poor little guys go and moved a position to let them pass. Why? Because he is full now. Moreover, there were two in his mouth, which were left for Yingguang. Besides, these were all fish from his own fishing ground. Since he didn't eat them, they certainly couldn't be wasted. Floating up a little, avoiding those panicking sea base, Qinzu came to Yingguang. After throwing two half-dead sea base directly next to it, Qinzu poked this guy with his big tail again, reminding it that delicious food was coming. Smelling the familiar smell of blood, Yingguang secretly raised his little head, and after seeing the familiar food, he didn't care about playing rogue anymore. With a flip, Yingguang's increasingly huge body directly pressed the two still jumping sea fish under him. Opening his already large mouth, Yingguang swallowed the two sea base whole, and patted his little belly with his meaty wings. Although the two sea base were not small, they were obviously not enough to feed this more than 2-meter-long manta ray. However, Yingguang didn't care about it at all, patting his little belly, looking very proud. It seemed to be saying, what I eat is not fish, but loneliness. After a lot of trouble, Yingguang had obviously forgotten what happened just now. He waved his wings and swam in one direction excitedly. Qinzu breathed a sigh of relief and hurried to follow him. After bypassing several small hills on the seabed, Qinzu followed Yingguang and came to a rocky seabed. It looked like it was a beach before, but for some reason, it was flooded by the sea. After arriving in this sea area, Yingguang looked a little nervous. Now, Qinzu's expression became serious. This guy looked like this, which proved that there must be something here that made it afraid. And what kind of existence could make a 2 or 3 meter long manta ray feel afraid? Well, it seems that there are many. Qinzu was a little embarrassed. A 2 or 3 meter long manta ray seemed to be not much better than a small shrimp in the sea. There was no way, because its attack power was not very strong. In other words, this guy has no attack power at all. Just when Qinzu was secretly alert, Yingguang suddenly stopped in front. Seeing this, Qinzu did not hesitate and followed directly. Just when he arrived beside Yingguang, Yu suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of crisis in his heart. Without time to think about it, Qinzu turned over and retreated directly to the back. When he stabilized his body, he found that there were suddenly more than a dozen small figures in front of him. If they were not mantis shrimps, what else could they be? However, what made him speechless was that he escaped, but the little guy Yingguang was taken care of by others. What he didn't know was that the target of these mantis shrimps has always been the little guy Yingguang, and they didn't go for him at all. Who made the little guy Yingguang blow away one of their brothers with one wing when he came for the first time? I thought this guy would not come again, and just wanted to go back to collect the body of my friend, but I saw this guy swaggering over again. This is really intolerable. Since you are here, don't leave. A dozen mantis shrimps surrounded it at the first time, and more mantis shrimps were coming. Qinzu was anxious when he saw it. You know what, if he was really surrounded by these guys, Yingguang might really die here. After all, the invincible mantis fist is not a joke. Yingguang has no armor to protect his body, and his whole body is fleshy. If he gets hit by a punch, his internal organs will not be able to bear it. Twisting his body, Qinzu rushed back again. He raised his big tail, aimed at the mantis shrimps that were more than 10 or 20 centimeters long, and whipped them directly. This tail was whipped so fast and urgent that it was in front of him as soon as it was raised. Caught off guard, several unlucky guys were hit directly, and they didn't even have a chance to fight back, and they flew away. The remaining dozen mantis shrimps were stunned by the sudden situation and subconsciously looked at Qinziu. Seeing this, Yingguang in the encirclement took this opportunity to swim upwards. He was so desperate that he almost used all his strength. As soon as Yingguang escaped from the danger zone, before the mantis shrimps could react, Qinziu's second tail came up. However, the results of this battle were not so satisfactory. Just now, 3 or 4 were killed by one tail, because these guys were gathered together and close to each other. But after 3 or 4 were killed, the remaining guys did not surround so tightly. This tail only knocked away one unlucky guy, and the rest was still fine. Chapter 830 Unknown Elements. Since Yingguang had escaped, Qinziu did not kill all the remaining guys, but quickly retreated and distanced himself from them. This is all future money, how can it be wasted so casually? When he reached a safe distance, Qinziu looked back at Yingguang. This guy thought he was going to go over, so he quickly waved his wings. The meaning was, if you want to go, you go, I won't go. Qinziu pouted, a timid guy. However, since it didn't want to go, Qinziu didn't force it. After sending it back, Qinziu slowly floated up by himself, and then approached the rocky sea little by little. It doesn't matter if you go, Qinziu got to the top, looked down, and almost jumped up. Happy. Because this huge sea area is full of small holes. And in these small holes, aren't they hiding those big fat mantis shrimps? Seeing this, Qinziu suppressed his excitement and continued to walk forward along this sea area. Perhaps Qinziu had just found the nest. Qinziu swam slowly on it, and below, the mantis shrimps were also very excited. From time to time, you can see mantis shrimps going in and out of the small hole, looking very busy. As he swam, Qinziu found something wrong. That is, there is no trace of other fish living in this sea area. He had been walking for a long time, but he didn't see a school of fish. Could it be, thinking of the habits of mantis shrimps, Qinziu had already found a reason for this in his heart. Yes, who would be willing to live with such a ferocious guy? After wandering around this sea area for a long time, Qinziu finally felt relieved. Not only are there some on the reefs, but there are also many on the seabed here. According to Qinziu's estimation, the reefs may be their nest, and the surrounding areas may be where they hunt. After wandering around the area for a while, Qinziu ended back home contentedly. With such a large group of mantis shrimps, no matter whether they're special mutations or congenital, Qinziu doesn't have to worry about the reproduction problem in the future. Unless the daily consumption rate can make the reproduction rate of mantis shrimps in several square miles unable to keep up. In this case, it is possible that these guys are in short supply. However, those are things that need to be worried about later. Qinziu's only thought now is to go back quickly and let him have a good sleep. Who said that plowing the fields does not consume physical strength? Tiandu fell down. Just think about it, what kind of physique does a cow need to be full of energy the next day? Halfway through the walk, Qinziu couldn't stand it anymore, so he took his thoughts back. Anyway, it's back to the ranch. This guy has been back before, so what's there to be afraid of? With this mentality, Qinziu squinted his eyes with relief and went to sleep peacefully. The next morning, the beautiful Zhu stayed in bed again. It can't be said that she was a lazy bedridden woman, it should be said that she couldn't get up. She wanted to get up, but she was helpless because her physical condition was not good enough. You bad guy, you are not allowed to touch me in the future. Supporting her somewhat weak body, the beautiful Zhu squinted her eyes and glared at Qinziu, who was still grinning. With a chuckle, Qinziu ignored Zhu Menggio's complaints, pecked her fair and tender face, and got out of bed to wash up. Downstairs, Qin's mother and others were eating around the dining table. After looking at Qinziu, Qin's mother opened her mouth to say something, but was glared at by Qin's father sitting opposite, and the words were swallowed back. Lazy uncle, shame on you. Tongton, who had 2 ponytails and a pair of silver knives and forks in her hands, sat on the tall dining table, swinging her legs and making faces at Qinziu. Glancing at the little girl unhappily, Qinziu sat at the dining table and picked up a sandwich. He stuffed it into his mouth and threatened, "Little girl, don't you want your pony anymore?" Tongton pursed her lips and fiddled with the knife and fork in her plate. Uncle is the best, not lazy at all. Qinziu smiled with satisfaction, touched Tongton's little head, and praised, "You are so good, you are worthy of being the smartest little girl. Okay, eat quickly." After rolling her eyes at her son, Qin's mother couldn't help asking, Where's your hasn't she gotten up yet? Ahem, she's feeling a little unwell. Kinzu scratched his head awkwardly, not daring to look into his mother's meaningful eyes, picked up a breakfast and ran upstairs. This damn child, looking at Kinzu's back, Kin's mother shook her head helplessly and lowered her head to continue eating breakfast. In the afternoon, when Kinzu was sitting under the porch, watching Tonton and Lily riding ponies and playing on the lawn in front of the villa, he finally received a call from Chen Mu. Boss, the test report is out. Chen Mu's voice was very excited on the phone. What's the result? Tell me. Kinzu's forehead was covered with black lines, and he urged with some dissatisfaction. Ahem, Chen Mu coughed twice in embarrassment, and said in a strange voice, Boss, the result is a bit unexpected. Oh? Kinzu's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and he said in a hurry, What's going on? Tell me quickly. After organizing his words, Chen Mu looked at the test report in his hand, looking a little excited and a little uneasy. It's like this, boss. According to the testing agency, they detected an unknown element in the sample we provided. Unknown element? Yes, boss. They said that it is still uncertain what effect this element has on the human body. As Chen Mu finished speaking, Kinzu on the other end of the phone fell silent. This news was both good news and bad news for him. The good thing was that if the unknown element was beneficial to the human body, then his restaurant would become famous in the entire American catering industry with this manchu shrimp. But what if it was harmful? Apart from anything else, the matter that had just been settled would be brought up again and put under the spotlight for research. After a long silence, Kinzu raised his head, looked at the green mountains and clear waters not far away, and said firmly, Continue the research, Brother Chen, tell them to find out the effect of this unknown element for me. Okay, boss, I understand. Chen Mu nodded, and just as he was about to hang up the phone, he heard Kinzu say again, Brother Chen, you have to remember that this is a commercial secret, let them sign a confidentiality agreement first. Chen Mu's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly responded, Boss, don't worry, I'll do it right away. Chapter 831 Artificial Respiration. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu stepped back a little weakly, feeling a little uneasy. He didn't know what he was worried about. But this emotion came out of nowhere. What's wrong? You look so sad. The beautiful Zhu was originally going to settle accounts with Kinzu, but when she got closer and saw his frowning brows, she couldn't help but ask with some worry. Hearing this, Kinzu raised his head, waved at her, and patted his thigh. Kinzu's direct action made Zhu Mengyo feel a little guilty. She turned her head and looked around quietly. When she saw that no one was paying attention to this side, she rolled her eyes at him unhappily. Don't make trouble, everyone is here. Kinzu didn't say anything, squinted his eyes, with a smile on his lips, and still patted his thigh. The beautiful Zhu felt helpless in her heart. This damn guy, doesn't he know to give him some face? However, seeing his frowning face, she felt a little distressed. Women are like this. Once their hearts soften, they will not refuse even if the request is too much, let alone such a simple one. After secretly looking around and making sure that no one was paying attention to this side, Zhu Mengyo gently moved her feet and came to Kinzu's side, sitting on his thighs. Before the beautiful Zhu sat down, Kinzu's lush claws had already reached out and wrapped around her slender waist on the left and right. Okay, just like that, don't move. Being hugged by Kinzu, Zhu Mengyo's body was a little stiff. She quickly reached out and pressed Kinzu's big hand, and said coquettishly, If you have anything to say it quickly, don't touch me. Seeing the beautiful Zhu's charming little appearance, Kinzu couldn't help but smile, and the worries between his eyebrows disappeared for the most part. He stretched his head over and rested it on Zhu Mengyo's weak shoulder. Kinzu was silent for a moment, but still told her in detail what had happened in the past 2 days. Since he has made up his mind to be with her, Kinzu feels that there is nothing to hide except the system. Ahem, except for women. As the old saying goes, there may be women who don't eat, but you can't find a woman who doesn't get jealous in the past 5,000 years. Of course, it is also possible that she has no feelings for you at all, so there is no question of jealousy. After listening to Kinzu's narration, Zhu Mengyo was also shocked. You mean, someone ate in your restaurant and almost didn't survive? Kinzu didn't say anything, but nodded. Seeing this, Zhu Mengyo continued to ask in confusion. Originally, the police have determined that your restaurant is fine, but you found something different. Kinzu nodded again. The beautiful Zhu was also a little entangled. Logically speaking, the best way now is to stop the test, take the samples back, and stop selling this kind of lobster with uncertain health in the restaurant in the future. But at the same time, this is another opportunity, an opportunity to make the restaurant famous. Okay, I've already asked Chain Mu to get tested, just wait for the results. Seeing Zhu Mengyo's little brows frowned, Qin Zhu rubbed her delicate little face with a smile. Don't make a fuss, such a big thing, you are not worried at all. Reaching out and slapping Qin Zhu's mischievous big hand, Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes cutely. Qin Zhu was sweating when he heard that. Who said I'm not worried? Didn't the person just ask me what I was worried about? How come everything changed in a blink of an eye? However, Qin Zhu understood one truth. That is, don't reason with women. Qin Zhu understood this very deeply. Therefore, in small matters, his general attitude is that what they say is what it is. This time is no exception. Since the beautiful Zhu said so, Qin Zhu also cooperated with a worried expression. Seeing this, the beautiful Zhu nodded with satisfaction. Just as she was about to continue to say something, she was interrupted by the childish voice of Tongton behind her. Uncle, Aunt, come ride the big horse. Riding her own pony, Tongton, who had 2 ponytails, waved her hands at the two with a flushed face. The call of Aunt made Zhu Mengyo feel so comfortable, and a bright smile appeared on her face. At this time, she didn't care about Qin Zhu's affairs, and she wanted to sit up with a force. However, it was easy to sit down, but it was a bit difficult to stand up. Husband, what are you doing? Let go. No, unless you kiss me. Qin Zhu smiled evilly and moved his face closer. You, with a pair of beautiful eyes, Zhu Mengyo stared at Qin Zhu. Tongton is still watching, aren't you afraid of corrupting the child? What are you afraid of? Qin Zhu shrugged indifferently. Kiss or not, if you don't kiss, I won't let you stand up. Zhu Mengyo had no choice but to lower her head and quickly pet Qin Zhu's old face, and then wanted to stand up. How could Qin Zhu let her do what she wanted so easily? Without saying a word, he moved her body over, and under her shy gaze, he directly imprinted on her. Ah, uncle is not ashamed. Seeing this, Tongton, who was not far away, screamed like a little adult and quickly covered her eyes with her hands. But, can you open your fingers a little wider? Lily, who was attracted by Tongton's cry, looked over and not only did not feel shy, but also educated her seriously. Aunt is giving uncle artificial respiration. Uncle must be sick. You watch here, I will call Mom to come. Fortunately, Qinwan was in the vegetable garden with Qin's mother and others at this time, and did not hear her son's words. Otherwise, it is estimated that this little guy would have to be taught a good lesson. After hearing Lily's words, the beautiful Zhu was ashamed, and immediately woke up from the intoxicated state and began to struggle hard. Qin Zhu also heard the words of the little guy Lily, and did not insist anymore. After kissing him hard twice, he let go of his hand. There was no way, he was also afraid that this little guy would really call the whole family over. By the time, he would be nagged to death by his mother. After Qin Zhu let go, Zhu Mengyo quickly stood up and quickly tidied up her messy clothes. Bad thing, I won't talk to you again. She glared at Qin Zhu with a blushing face, twisted her waist, and walked towards Tongton and Lily. She wanted to stop the little guy, but she must not let them call people. Qin Zhu lay on his back on the recline, looking at everything in front of him with a smile, not looking anxious at all, but his heart was filled with a warm feeling. This feeling was something he had never felt when he was with Mobica or Eva. Touching his chin, Qin Zhu thought thoughtfully, perhaps, this is the difference between domestic flowers and wild flowers. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subieron sinis fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 832. Stunned Qin Zhu. The drizzle slowly fell on the vast pasture. Sitting under the porch, Qin Zhu, holding a cup of hot tea in his hand, looked at the fine rain curtain and was in a daze. Suddenly, a pair of slender legs wearing transparent rain boots gradually appeared in his sight. In the transparent rain boots, there was a pair of familiar, perfect jade feet wearing printed socks. Slowly, under Qin Zhu's gaze, the beautiful legs moved gracefully from a distance to the front. Is the result not out yet? When they got closer, Zhu Mengyo sat down next to Qin Zhu and looked at him with some heartache. Qin Zhu came back from his contemplation and shook his head silently. It It has been almost a week, but although Chen Mu called every day as a routine, there was no good news at all. According to him, the guys in the laboratory were like possessed, lying in the laboratory all day long, and didn't even come out. What? You ask him how he knows so much. Nonsense, since the stuff was sent to the laboratory, Chen Mu has been waiting at the door every day. How about we go over and urge them? Seeing Qin Zhu not saying anything, Zhu Mengyo suggested something. But Qin Zhu smiled softly after hearing this. This research is not something that can be done just by urging them. Reaching out and gently stroking her smooth hair, Qin Zhu suddenly thought of Chen Mu's appearance these days, and the smile on his lips unconsciously increased a little more. Besides, Chen Mu is squatting at the door every day, and his speed has not increased. But waiting all the time is not a solution. Upon hearing this, the beautiful Zhu couldn't help but raise her little mouth and sighed softly. You haven't been there to accompany them these days, and your uncle and aunt are all dissatisfied. This, Qin Zhu scratched his head when he heard Zhu Mengyo talk about this. He has been thinking about this matter these days, and the promise to go to the United States with his parents before can only be postponed helplessly. Fortunately, these days, Zhu Mengyo would accompany her parents and her sister's family to walk around in the small towns around Boston. Otherwise, Qin's mother would probably hold his ears and scold him for a whole day. But Qin Zhu had no choice. In order to thoroughly understand the growth and reproduction of this patch of Manchu shrimp, he would go out to sea with Will every day to conduct field investigations. If it hadn't suddenly rained this morning, he should have been drifting on the sea at this time. Let's do this, tomorrow, there shouldn't be any rain tomorrow, let's go for a good stroll. Gritting his teeth, Qin Zhu decided to put this matter aside for the time being. Anyway, he was not short of money now, so there was no need to make himself like this for the sake of making money. Of course, the reason why it became like this was actually not related to money. Because he had too many ways to make money. Not to mention the seemingly inexhaustible sea, the money from selling milk on his ranch alone was enough for his expenses every day. And now, the reason why he cared so much about the test results was because of the girl who was still lying in the hospital. Qin Zhu was not a person who liked to evade responsibility. If he could prove that this was really his fault, he would do everything he could to make Hyena recover. However, all this could not be told to others. Therefore, this also led to Qin's father and mother being a little dissatisfied with him. According to Qin's mother, you are so rich now, why are you still messing around? Why don't we pack up and go home? Ding-ling-ling, just when Qin Zhu's thoughts were a little drifting, a quick phone ring suddenly rang in his ears. Yo, help me see who it is. Lying comfortably on the recline, Qin Zhu glanced at the phone on the coffee table and pursed his lips at the beautiful Zhu on the side. Zhu Mengyo did not refuse, or rather, she was used to Qin Zhu's masterly behavior. Picking up the phone and taking a look, Zhu Mengyo said with a hint of excitement in her voice, "Honey, it's Chen Mu's, is the result out?" "How is that possible?" Qin Zhu didn't even raise his head, and unconsciously retorted, "When I called yesterday, I said it would take at least a week to get the news." "Ah, what should I do then?" When the beautiful Zhu heard this, she immediately lost interest and looked at Qin Zhu at the phone. "Do you answer it or not?" "Answer it, let's see what this guy says." Waving his hand, Qin Zhu signaled Zhu Mengyo to answer it herself, and he squinted his eyes and continued to doze off. But before he could get into this state, he was awakened by a cry of surprise. "What, you said the result is out?" After the other party said it again with certainty, Zhu Mengyo covered the flower bed and turned her head to look at Qin Zhu with some surprise. Chen Mu said, the results are out." Qin Zhu, who was standing nearby, finally understood the situation, reached out to take the phone, and forcibly suppressed his excitement, and asked, "Brother Chen, what did you say?" "The results are out." Out. After repeating it twice with some excitement, Chen Mu said with some excitement, "Boss, we're rich, we're really rich." Hearing this, Qin Zhu's heart skipped a beat, and he instantly understood the result of the matter. The uneasy mood that had been a little uneasy all along also became stable. "The result is very good." "No, it's very good." Chen Mu's voice was full of excitement, and he said excitedly, "Boss, do you know what the unknown element does?" Qin Zhu flicked his head and said a little depressed, "Chen Mu, I promise, if you keep playing dumb, all your salary for this year will be deducted." "Ah, don't. Chen Mu was startled, and his mind was instantly cleared up a lot, and he quickly begged for mercy. "Boss, I'll tell you, isn't it okay?" Without waiting for Qin Zhu to continue asking questions, Chen Mu said shockingly, "This unknown element, according to the preliminary analysis of the laboratory, has the effect of inhibiting the development of cancer cells. What? Qinzhou was stunned. Treat cancer? Are you kidding? Boss, you heard it right, this element can really inhibit the continued division of cancer cells. Chen Mu's tone was very serious, and it didn't sound like a joke. But Qinzhou couldn't connect the legendary mantis shrimp with anti-cancer. Of course. Chen Mu on the other end of the phone shrugged and said with some regret, now this is just a preliminary result. The specific effect and function still need further clinical trials to verify. Qinzhou was stunned, then reacted and shouted anxiously, then what are you waiting for, hurry up and verify it. Without waiting for Chen Mu to speak, Qinzhou thought about it for a while and said, wait, I will contact the hospital, let's quickly confirm this matter. Chapter 833 still not working. Boss. I'm afraid this won't work. Chen Mu's voice calmed down the excited Qinzhou. He asked in confusion, why not? Are they unwilling? No, they are very willing. Chen Mu shook his head seriously, regardless of whether Qinzhou saw it or not. The guys in the laboratory are very concerned about the discovery of new elements, because once the effect of this element is confirmed, they will definitely become famous. Why is that? Qinzhou was even more confused. It's not a problem with the laboratory or the hospital. Could it be? Sure enough, Chen Mu's words confirmed Qinzhou's guess. Boss, we don't have enough elements. In the past few days, we have invested more than 300 mantis shrimps just to supply laboratory research. So many. Qinzhou was a little shocked. More than 300. Even if one is calculated at the lowest price of $500, it has cost him more than $100,000 in these few days. However, all this is worth it. Qinzhou hardened his heart and thought of the densely packed mantis shrimps on the seabed. He said firmly, Brother Chen, production is not a problem. I will give you as many mantis shrimps as you want. I have only one request, and that is to get the specific results for me as soon as possible. This is difficult. Chen Mu poured a basin of cold water on him in a timely manner, which made Qinzhou feel chilled to the bone. Scratching his head, Qinzhou yelled in frustration, leaned back on the recline, and said loudly, Tell me, why is this? Chen Mu also sighed helplessly, lying on his boss chair, and explained, Boss, they said that even if the raw materials are sufficient, they will need at least 1 month to conduct clinical trials, and it will take at least 1 month from clinical trials to get specific data. In other words, we won't get definite news within 2 months. For now, yes. Qinzhou pouted helplessly, hung up the phone, and looked deeply at the mountains in the misty rain in the distance, speechless for a long time. Zhu Mengyo, who was sitting next to him, heard half of it. It seemed to be a good result, but it seemed that the result was not very satisfactory. Seeing that Qinzhou was a little depressed, he couldn't help but ask with concern, What's wrong? What did Chen Mu say? Hearing the voice, Qinzhou retracted his gaze and shook his head helplessly. One good news, one bad news. What do you mean? Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at this guy with some dissatisfaction. Are you going to let me guess it myself? Ahem, Qinzhou couldn't help but cough twice when he heard this. How could he be led astray by Chen Mu? Seeing that the beautiful Zhu was staring at him with some coquettishness, his whole body softened, and he quickly told him everything like a bamboo chew pouring beans. Lobster can also fight cancer. Sure enough, when hearing this effect, the beautiful Zhu's cherry-like mouth grew wide. Qinzhou smiled and shook his head. No, now we can only say that there is this possibility. That's also very amazing, okay? Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at him with some coquettishness. That's anti-cancer, as long as there is such a possibility, don't be crazy. That's true. Touching his chin, Qinzhou said thoughtfully, as long as there is a little possibility, those patients will be willing to try it. Yes. Zhu Mengyo nodded. Your restaurant will definitely be full by then. So, the production must keep up. Thinking of this, Qinzhou stood up and prepared to go out to sea again. Hey, where are you going? Zhu Mengyo stopped Qinzhou, who wanted to go out. I'm going to the dock to find Will, and then go out to sea. Are you crazy? The beautiful Zhu pushed him unhappily and pointed at the drizzling rain outside. In this weather, you should stay at home and don't go anywhere. But, no buts. Pretending to be fierce and staring at Qinzhou, Zhu Mengyo wrinkled her little nose and said in a coquettish way, You can never make enough money, and you must rest when you need to rest. Okay. Patting his head, Qinzhou sat back down again. I'll listen to you, let's wait until the weather is good before going. Isn't that right? Zhu Mengyo leaned over with satisfaction and quickly pet Qin Zhu's old face. But just when she was about to run away, she was pulled into the arms of the quick-eyed and quick-handed Qin Zhu. Ah, don't, there are people here, woo woo woo. Coincidentally, just when the two were getting into the mood, the door next to them suddenly opened, and Qin Wan came out with Lei Lei and Tong Tong. Ah, Mom, look, Uncle is giving Aunt artificial respiration. In the afternoon, the drizzle finally stopped. Although there was no sun, the sky was cloudless, and it could be seen that the weather had cleared up. Go, go, on the pasture, in the dark green grass, two little black horses were galloping hard. Why do I say hard? That's because the height of the grass is almost as high as the pony. It is really difficult for these two little guys to gallop freely in it. Okay, Tongton, Lily, stop chasing and come out quickly. Not far away, on a tall white horse that looked like a snowy mountain, Qin Zhu, wearing a leather jacket and riding boots, was watching the two little guys wandering around in the pasture with a smile on his face. Of course, there was a reason why they were wandering around in the pasture. It is said that it is suitable to catch rabbits after the rain. Qin Zhu, who was a little bored in the villa, was ready to go out for a stroll. The two little guys who had been following their uncle's footsteps closely were naturally not left behind. Let alone them. Qin Zhu glanced back and saw 5 little guys sitting in a row beside him. Well, if you don't pay attention, except for the slightly fat little guy, the others looked like puppies. Needless to say, these are the brothers Dio and Da Hectares, plus a little bear who is a little oversized. Uncle, what should we do if we can't catch them? Just as he was thinking about it, the grass in front of him parted, and Lily, wearing a small raincoat and riding on a pony, came out a little dejected. Yes, Uncle, it's hard to catch them, the pony can't catch up with them. Following closely, Tongton also came out from the grass on a pony. What should we do if we can't catch them? Qin Zhu didn't rush to help, but crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking at the two little guys thoughtfully. Hearing this, Lily looked at the grass that was still shaking not far away, raised his little head, and looked at Qin Zhu with hopeful eyes. Uncle, can you help us catch them? Chapter 834 Catching Rabbits After the Rain. Hey, I want to help too, but who made trouble this morning? Touching his chin, Qin Zhu looked at the two little guys in front of him with a smiling expression on his face. What trouble? With a pair of big eyes, Lady Lei looked at Qin Zhu in a daze. However, the two black gemstone-like eyeballs in his big eyes were rolling around, looking particularly cute. Really? Little guy. Leaning down, Qin Zhu stretched out his hand to pinch his red little face, with a few malicious words in his tone. Uncle, I won't dare to do it again. After being pinched by Qin Zhu, Lady Lei immediately begged for mercy pitifully. Okay, Lady Lei didn't mean it. Zhu Mengyo rode over from the other side and happened to see this scene, so she spoke well of the little guy. There was no way, who made these two little guys so well behaved at ordinary times, even if they were a little naughty occasionally, the beautiful Zhu would choose to pretend not to see it. Qin Zhu had no choice. Since his wife had spoken, he could only let this naughty little guy go. He let go of his hand in dismay, and looked at the little guy who ran behind Zhu Mengyo. Qin Zhu said unhappily, "Little thing, if you are naughty again next time, I will punish you." However, with the support of his aunt, the little guy did not take his uncle's threat seriously at all, but urged, "Uncle, hurry up, the little rabbits are running away." Qin Zhu was so depressed that he rolled his eyes and waved to the little guy sitting in a row next to him. "Target little rabbits, let's go." The little guy who had been punished by Qin Zhu several times, when he heard the word target, he immediately concentrated his mind, and when Qin Zhu waved his hand in front, he immediately rushed out. There was no other way. Whoever didn't rush out would not be able to eat for a day. So, after being hungry for a few times, as long as Qin Zhu waved his hand, the guys would rush out first, regardless of whether they saw anything or not. Seeing this, Qin Zhu showed a satisfied smile on his face, and turned his head to look at the beautiful Zhu beside him. "How is it? The training results are very significant, right?" "Oh, the effect is quite good." Zhu Mengyo nodded slightly, affirming Qin Zhu's training results. However, just when Qin Zhu was complacent, she pointed to the front with her delicate hand and asked, "What is Betty doing?" Qin Zhu looked up and couldn't help but float a few black lines on his forehead. It turned out that Betty, because he rushed too hard and didn't brake, fell directly into the grass. Originally, this is nothing. Just get up after falling down. But because this guy is too fat, and his two hind legs are tripped by the grass, he didn't get up after climbing several times, and he was so anxious that he kept humming and calling. Seeing his companion fall, the big tiger brothers didn't react much, but Daha and Xiaohe stopped. But after trying several times, the two tired little huskies kept panting, and they couldn't get Betty to turn over. Qinzhu, who was not far away, couldn't stand it any longer. He got off his horse, walked a few steps closer, stretched out his hand to push aside the grass, and finally turned Betty over. He was going to scold this guy, but when he looked up, he saw Betty's pitiful eyes, and the words of scolding were on his lips, but he couldn't say them. You'd better stay outside. Helplessly, Qinzhu bent down and picked up the fat little guy, waved to Daha and Xiaohe, and walked out. Hearing that she didn't have to go around in the pasture, Betty was so excited that she started to twist in Qinzhu's arms. Pa! Oh! Hearing Betty's screams, Tongton and Lily immediately took their eyes away from Daha and the others. Bad uncle, how could you throw a little dog? Turning over and getting off the horse, Tongton trotted over, stretched out her hand to help Betty, who was still wailing, and stared at Qinzhu with her big eyes with her pouty mouth. Well, it fell down by itself. Qinzhu was sweating. Who knew this guy was so dishonest? Bad uncle, the little dog is so pitiful, and you still throw it. After glaring at Qinzhu, Tongton stretched out her hand to pick up the little guy, but she failed after trying several times, which made the little guy cry even more happily. Qinzhu curled his lips when he saw this. Considering the brown bear's thick skin and flesh, how hard could it fall if it fell from his body and landed on the grass? However, looking at the little girl's expression of heartache, Qinzhu didn't dare to say anything, so he had to let Betty howl there. After dragging and pulling, the two little guys finally dragged Betty back with great effort. Okay, just stay here, let's ignore the bad uncle. Patting Betty's little body, Tongton pretended to be a little adult to comfort her. Puchi, seeing Qinzhu's depressed look, Zumengyo couldn't help but giggle. Still laughing, look at what this little guy has become now. Pointing at Betty, who was humming comfortably under the little girl's hands, Qinzhu was so angry that his teeth itched. This little thing was too outrageous. Okay, Keek, you threw me down and didn't allow me to howl twice. After saying something to the little guy with a smile, Zumengyo shifted her sight to a place not far away. There, the brothers Daha and Jia had already found a target and were chasing and intercepting them. Qinzhu, who heard the sound, also turned his eyes over, but he secretly made up his mind to put Betty on a diet. Betty, who was being comforted by the little girl, shuddered inexplicably, as if something bad was going to happen, and couldn't help but howl twice again. However, the little girl and Lei's thoughts were now shifted to the brother Daha who was chasing the little rabbit. In response to Betty's howling, he just stroked her harder, not caring as much as he did at the beginning. Woof woof woof, roar, a few immature barks and crisp tiger roars rang out on the pasture after the rain. As the grass kept shaking, Qinzhu and his companions could only vaguely see a few sounds passing through it, but they couldn't see the specific situation clearly. Let's go in and take a look. Turning his head and signaling to the others, Qinzhu jumped on his horse and prepared to go a little further in. But, what should we do with it? Tongton and Lily also wanted to go in and take a look, but looking at Betty lying beside them, they felt a little embarrassed. Seeing this, Qinzhu was happy and smiled a little. It's okay, give it to me, I'll take it with me. Ouch, Betty didn't appreciate Qinzhu's kindness, and she backed away with her big butt sticking out. But as the old saying goes, it's different now and then. Now the two little guys are eager to rush over to see the fun, so why would they care about Betty's thoughts? Chapter 835. Memories evoked by the Hape sculpture. In the end, Qinzhu still couldn't bear to punish the little guy under the pitiful look in his eyes. Holding Betty, Qinzhu rode on a horse and followed with a few people. However, just as he caught up with Daha and the others, he heard a burst of excited barking. No need to think, it must have succeeded. Sure enough, after a while, Daha ran over with a bloody grey rabbit in his mouth. Qinzhu frowned when he saw this, fearing that the two little guys would not be used to it. Just when he wanted to let Daha take it back to the villa, he heard two cheers from the side. Uncle, the little dog is so powerful, it caught a rabbit. Lady, who rode a horse to catch up, saw the grey hair in Daha's mouth and shouted excitedly. Even Tongton clapped her hands after seeing it, as if the little girl who was about to cry because of Betty's distress just now was not her. Qinzhu was very puzzled by this, and looked at the beautiful Zhu and shrugged helplessly. Back at the villa, King's mother was very happy about the wild rabbits they caught. She smiled and said, "These little guys, they eat every day, and this time they finally have some effect." Kinzu really had nothing to say about his mother's point of view. It seems that she thought this was a local dog raised at home, and if she gave it some food, it would definitely have some effect. However, thinking about it this way, Kinzu felt that his mother was right. If you are given food and drink every day, it would be fine if you don't have any effect, but if you still cause trouble every day, what are you for? Thinking of this, Kinzu glanced at Betty, who was dozing off as soon as she came back, and thought about how to make her have some effect. "Oh, is there an extra meal today?" King's father, who came back from the shooting range with a long gun, looked at the bloody wild rabbit on the ground and showed a hint of excitement on his face. Patting his head, Kinzu remembered that he was tired of eating here every day, but his family rarely ate wild game. After all, his home is located in a plain, there are no big mountains, and there is basically no game. Thinking of game, Kinzu naturally thought of hunting, and couldn't help but suggest, "Dad, there are a lot of game in the nearby mountains. I'll take you in to shoot a few big ones when I have time." When King's father heard this, his eyes lit up and he rubbed his hands excitedly. "That's good. I'm a little tired of practicing shooting every day. Yes, I've wanted to go into the mountains for a while." Li Jianhua, who was following behind, also heard Kinzu's words and immediately became excited. Kinzu smiled and waved his hand. "There's no rush. The weather is not very good these 2 days. Let's go into the mountains to have a look when the sun comes out in a few days." When the two of them ordered, Kinzu suddenly thought of something, walked away a few steps, put his hand to his mouth and blew a loud whistle. Cry, with a loud eagle cry, a huge harpy eagle with distinct black and white colors all over its body soared from the top of the villa. "What is this?" Now, everyone present was stunned. Except for Kinru and Kinwan, who had seen it in the photos posted by Kinzu, it was the first time for the others to see a harpy eagle. Taking the shoulder strap handed over by Zhu Mingyu, Kinzu smiled and explained to the puzzled eyes of several people, "Dad, Mom, this is a harpy eagle, which is similar to the eagle in our house and is used for hunting." "Similar to an eagle?" Pointing to the harpy eagle in the sky, King's father asked excitedly, "Have you seen such a big eagle?" Kinzu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. "Dad, what I mean is that its function is similar to that of an eagle. Did you raise it too?" This time it was King's mother who asked the question. She stared at the harpy eagle in the sky with an unhappy look on her face. "Such a big eagle, do you know how much meat it can eat in a day?" Kinzu wiped the cold sweat again and explained quickly, "Mom, this guy will go out to find food by himself, so good." Hearing this, King's mother nodded with satisfaction. "That's about right, look at you, you keep so many useless ones, be careful not to eat you out of money." "How could this happen?" Kinzu smiled twice and felt that he had changed the subject. "Mom, wait, I'll let it go and prepare 2 wild game for you." As he said that, Kinzu pinched his fingers and whistled at the sky again. 3, flapped his wings, which had a wingspan of more than 3 meters, lowered his head, and dived straight down. He waited until he was more than 3 meters away from the ground, and when King's father and mother's faces changed, flapped his wings to stop his body, and landed lightly on Kinzu's shoulder. "Tin, tin," called out twice softly, and rubbed his head against Kinzu's face to express his affection. Kinzu felt a little itchy from being rubbed by so he stretched out his arm and let it move down, then asked with a smile, "Why are you alone, where's Pape?" "Tin, tin," called out twice more, and raised his head to gesture upstairs, then put his head back. Kinzu only remembered at this time that it seemed that Pape was hatching eggs at the beginning. How long has it been? Why is there no movement? Could it be 2 rotten eggs? Kinzu scratched his head in confusion, and when he was wondering whether to go upstairs to take a look, he found that he was surrounded by people. Tin, before Kinzu had time to speak, a loud eagle cry sounded in his ears. "Be quiet." The sudden high decibels made his ears uncomfortable, and Kinzu flicked Ha's head twice in annoyance. Li shrank his neck and dared not to shout anymore. However, his little eyes were rolling around, and he looked at the people in front of him with great curiosity. He actually understood that the people in front of him were all his own people, otherwise he would have attacked them when he swooped down just now. However, the arrogant harpy eagle was not used to being watched by people, so he complained a little. TSK, this size is several times bigger than the eagle I raised before." Looking at the harpy eagle squatting obediently on Kinzu's arm, King's father's eyes were full of envy and an indescribable attachment. Dad, have you raised an eagle before? Kinzu raised his head in surprise. Not to mention Kinzu, even Kinwan and Kinru looked at their father with surprised eyes. Growing up, the three siblings had never heard of this. That was a long time ago. Speaking of this, Kin's father's eyes were a little dazed, obviously lost in some memories. However, when Kin's father was talking about this, the expression on Kin's mother's face was a little strange. Extra update for the leader of the pig-riding grassland, 1920s, chapter 836. Kin's father's past. With the narration of Kin's father, Kinzu and his three siblings finally figured out what was going on. It turned out that when Kin's father was young, a friend was moving away from the village. When he left, he gave him a young eagle. Kin's father loved this young eagle to the core. On the one hand, it was because Kin's father liked eagles, and on the other hand, this eagle was also mixed with Kin's father's thoughts for his friend. So, even though that conditions at the time were difficult, he still fed the eagle white and fat. However, eagles have a big appetite after all, and they are carnivores. And what about that era? Meat was originally a scarce thing. Even if Kin's father cut back on his clothes and diet, he still couldn't bear it after raising it for a year. In addition, that year, he married Kin's mother under the introduction of his family, so there was even less he could do. On a sunny day, Kin's father fed the eagle well, took a car away from his hometown, and released it. After listening to the story, Kinzu thought of the strange expression on his mother's face and asked unexpectedly, "Dad, that friend is a girl, right?" "Yes." Kin's father nodded subconsciously and admitted it. But then, he came to his senses and waved his hands. "What man or woman, it has nothing to do with that friend." It would have been better if he didn't say it. After this explanation, everyone looked at him differently. Kinru, the little girl, didn't give her father any face at all and laughed secretly. Kin's mother didn't say anything, but snorted coldly and turned her head to go into the house. Seeing this, Kin's father was a little worried. He glared at the troublesome children and hurriedly chased after them. Ha ha ha, even Kinzu couldn't help it now. Seeing the backs of the two elders had disappeared in the villa, he laughed directly. "I didn't expect that when my father was young, there was such a lingering story." Kinru shook her little head and expressed her opinion like a little adult. "However, I guess Dad is going to be in trouble now. He is still thinking about his first love." "What first love?" Kinzu restrained his smile when he heard it, rolled his eyes at her, and asked, "How is your book going?" Speaking of this, Kinru was stuck for a moment, with a bitter face, and said depressedly, "Brother, why don't I go back to China? English is too difficult to learn." "Go back to China?" Touching his chin, Kinzu said with a smirk, "It seems it's too late to go back to China. School has already started." Kinru's face became even more bitter when she heard it, and she muttered, "Then what should I do? I haven't even learned English, how can I go to class?" "Ha ha, little girl, now you know how difficult it is." Seeing that he had almost laughed enough, Kinzu smiled and said, "I'll find a tutor for you in a few days to help you with English." Hearing this, Kinru was not happy, but school has started at home, and it will be soon in the United States, right? "Don't worry." Kinzu shrugged. "Even if they don't open school, you won't be able to catch up if you go." You still let me rest assured." Kinru stared at her brother with her big eyes, feeling that there was a great power in her heart that was about to be suppressed. "Yes." Kinzu nodded and said as a matter of course, "Don't worry, we will start from the 9th grade when the time comes, so there will be no delay." I have to go through the 9th grade again." Kinru opened her mouth, a little wanting to cry but no tears. "It seems that you don't have to worry, but you just want me to go through the 3rd grade again. If I had known this, I might as well finish the second half of the semester in China." Kinru was just feeling depressed, and she heard her bad brother say with a smile, "Little girl, the 9th grade here is not the 3rd grade in China." Isn't the 9th grade the 3rd grade?" Looking up in astonishment, Kinru stared at him in disbelief. "Yes, Xiao Zhu, if the 9th grade is not the 3rd grade, then what is it?" Kinwan was also a little confused at this time. "Of course not." Looking at the two confused people in front of him, Kinzu explained with a smile, "The United States is different from China. They don't have elementary schools, junior high schools, and high schools. They are only divided into 3 stages of education: primary education, secondary education, and higher education. Primary education refers to the education levels of kindergarten, grades 1 to 5. Secondary education is divided into two levels. One corresponds to our domestic junior high school, which is also a 3-year system, namely grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8. High school is 1 year longer than ours and is divided into 4 years, from grade 9 to grade 12. Is it almost the same? Kinru pouted and said a little depressed. After all, I still have to go to school for 1 more semester. This time it was Kinzu's turn to be speechless. It seemed that what this girl said made sense. Shaking his head, Kinzu ignored the girl's depression and said with a smile, "Okay, since we are here, let's make a happy decision. I will find you a special English tutor in a few days." Zumengyo, who was standing by, opened her mouth and wanted to say that she would teach her. However, thinking about what Kinzu had told her, she didn't say anything. After sending the girl away, Kinzu looked at Haha on his arm and gently stroked its soft feathers. "It's your turn to show off today. Go and find me some food." As if he understood what Kinzu said, Haha raised his head and made a few gurgling sounds in his throat, as if to say, "Just watch me, finding some food is nothing." Seeing this, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction and raised his arms up with force. Haha, who was very spiritual, kicked with his legs at the same time as Kinzu exerted force, and rushed into the sky quickly like an arrow from a string. "Oh my god, shucks you trained these big birds so well." Li Jianhua watched all this from the side and couldn't help but feel envious. As a man, he not only loves playing with guns, but also has a special liking for such big birds. Ahem, no, what big bird? It should be a bird of prey. I didn't train it much either, mainly because this harpy eagle is very spiritual. Kinzu smiled and said modestly. However, what others think is a modest statement, but for Kinzu, it is really the truth. Since receiving these 2 harpy eagles, Kinzu has really not trained them much except taking them with him when hunting. "You said this is a harpy eagle? No wonder it is so big." Hearing Kinzu say this is a harpy eagle, Li Jianhua was somewhat relieved. Although he has never seen a harpy eagle, and can't tell the specific difference between a harpy eagle and a golden eagle, he has heard of this bird, which is the largest in the world. "Yes, Hapdao, didn't you see its head just now? There is no other head with such a unique character except Hapdao." Kinzu smiled and nodded, turned around and walked into the house. He also wanted to go see the old couple in the villa, but they must not fight over that. Extra update for the leader who rides pigs to the grassland, and the extra update of the leader is finally over. While feeling ashamed of my update speed, I would like to thank you again for your reward. The first leader of this book is worth commemorating. Chapter 837. The Golden Eagle attacks. But Kinzu was obviously overthinking. How could they fight over such a small matter after being married for decades? Ahem, of course, looking at the way Kin's father hung his head, he knew that he must have been punished. Kinzu wisely did not go to offend him. After walking around, he ran out quickly. Even Pape's thoughts of going upstairs to take a look were thrown aside. Thinking that Haha would be back soon, he couldn't go far, so he simply sat down under the porch of the door and waved to Betty. Betty, who had just finished her personal hygiene and was about to return to her warm nest to continue hibernating, was caught by Kinzu very sadly. Looking at the waving big hand, Betty wanted to ignore it, but thinking about the consequences, alas, with a petty sigh, Betty hung her head, moved her fat little body, and came to Kinzu. And what about Kinzu? Looking at this brown bear with a fat head and small ears, he was also helpless. This guy has been exercising a lot. Although he hasn't joined the fine tradition of running every morning, he has never stopped. But it seems to have no effect. "Uncle, don't bully the puppy." Just as he was thinking about it, Tomton's crisp little voice came over. Kinzu was so angry. "Your little guy, this is really intolerable." Turning his head, with a bright smile on his face, Kinzu weakly argued. "Little ancestor, this is a bear, not a puppy." "Yes." The little girl nodded in agreement with her uncle's words. "But, the little bear is not as nice as the puppy, so it is called a puppy." Kinzu's forehead has already hit several black lines floating on it. "Okay. The name is not nice, so you just change the race of the person. It's called a puppy. What about Daha and Xiaohe? They are also puppies." Looking at the little girl with a matter-of-fact expression, Kinzu finally understood one thing. Never try to reason with a woman. Even if she is just a little woman. After waving his hand and asking the little girl to take Betty away, Kinzu lay helplessly on the recline, waiting for Haha's triumphant return. Bored, Kinzu suddenly thought of finding a tutor for his sister, so he took out his mobile phone. Now it is different from when he first came. At the time, he didn't know that he had to go out in person to recruit a cowboy. Now, he just called Jefferson and told him his requirements, and then he just had to wait for the applicants to come to the ranch. Well, of course, Jefferson will definitely select the first round, otherwise anyone can come to the ranch to apply, and Kinzu will be annoyed to death. After hanging up the phone, he whistled proudly. Kinzu felt so happy in his heart, and his life was comfortable now. Cry, accompanied by a faint cry of an eagle, a small black dot in the distant sky quickly approached the sky above the ranch. Originally, Kinzu thought that Haha had come back from hunting, but when the black dot got closer, he found something wrong. Because in his sight, the small black dot suddenly turned into two. Why are there two? Is there another raptor coming to make trouble? Although he felt something was wrong, Kinzu did not do anything. In his opinion, he was near the Appalachian Mountains, and it was normal for raptors to pass by. However, the development of things was a little beyond his expectations. These two guys actually ran straight to the villa. Are they really here to make trouble? Kinzu suddenly sat up from the recline. At this time, he suddenly remembered that Pape was still hatching eggs upstairs. While thinking about it, he heard an eagle's cry suddenly from the roof. However, this eagle's cry sounded so harsh and sharp. Husband, something seems to be wrong. Zumengyo, who heard the cry, also rushed over from the grassland. She knew Haha and Pape, and the two raptors hovering above her head at this moment were obviously not them. You are here with bad intentions. Kinzu waved at his brother-in-law and turned to walk into the villa. After entering the villa, Kinzu looked at his father who was helping his mother, and called out, Dad, come here, come to my room. Kin's father was about to say that he had something else to do, but he saw his son-in-law also followed him upstairs. Now, he knew that something must have happened, so he wiped his hands and followed him. When he arrived at the bedroom, he found that Kinzu had already opened the gun cabinet and was taking out a gun. Kin's father was really anxious. Xiaozu, what's wrong? Are you going to use a weapon? Kinzu didn't even raise his head. He gave each of them a gun and took the bullets. Then he smiled and said, Let's have a real battle today. Although he was smiling, his smile was full of murderous intent. Because Kinzu had already recognized the two birds of prey. They were two of the golden eagles that besieged the harp eagle couple. Since these two are here, what about the others? Are they here too? The more Kinzu thought about it, the more anxious he became. He couldn't help but speed up his movements. After distributing the guns, he led a few people out of the bedroom, but Kinzu was a little worried. He turned his head to look at the beautiful Zhu beside him and asked, Have you seen Dale? Where is she now? I don't know, you go first, I'll call her. Kinzu nodded, and his heart was at ease. His shooting skills were originally mediocre, not to mention that the target was a golden eagle that was sprinting rapidly. It would be difficult to hit it. However, if Dale and the others were there would be no need to worry. When they arrived at the Sky Garden, Kinzu first calmed Pape's somewhat frightened mood, and then looked up at the two guys hovering in the air. When they saw Kinzu and his men appear, the two golden eagles that were originally hovering in the air leisurely suddenly became furious, and they even let out a sharp eagle cry. But Kinzu responded to them with a bullet that emitted hot bullets. Yes, no nonsense, no matter what kind of protected animal it is, Kinzu just shot it. Here, although protected animals have a high status, there is no saying that only animals are allowed to attack you, but you are not allowed to attack them. Even if it is their national bird, the bald eagle, as long as it endangers you, you can still shoot it. Therefore, facing the two furious golden eagles, Kinzu fired decisively. However, just as he expected, although he fired several shots in succession, not a single shot could hit the two birds of prey moving rapidly in the air. Because at the moment the gunshots rang out, the two golden eagles flapped their wings and were already more than 10 meters away. It's Monday, and I haven't asked for rewards for a long time. I'm asking for a wave of rewards and recommendations. Chapter 838. Cannon, damn it. After cursing angrily, Kinzu turned his head and looked at his father and brother-in-law. Dad, be careful. Don't let this guy run down. Kin's father and Li Jianhua came back to their senses, nodded repeatedly, and raised their guns. There was no way. Kinzu's action just now was too sudden, and they didn't understand what he was going to do, so they could only watch from the side. No matter how fierce the golden eagle is, it is just a bird after all. Facing human hot weapons, even if they can dodge, they will never dare to take risks. So after dodging Kinzu's shots, the two guys kept circling in the sky, neither coming down nor leaving. Now, Kinzu was a little confused. On the one hand, he was worried about Haha's safety, and on the other hand, he couldn't reach these guys, and he had the urge to go crazy. Fortunately, just when Kinzu was about to run away, Dale and Erica arrived together. "Boss, do you want to shoot it down?" Holding her cannon, Dale looked eager to try. Kinzu's expression became a little excited when he heard it, waving his hands and shouting, "Shoot it down for me, quickly." "Kinzu, why don't you call Stella to tell her about the situation?" Zumengi also came over from behind at this time and suggested softly, "In order to avoid trouble in the future, you'd better tell her about the situation first, it's just a phone call." Kinzu thought about it and nodded, thinking that what the beautiful ladies you said made sense. Although hunting protected animals is not a big crime, it's better to avoid some troubles when you're in someone else's territory. Besides, just like Zumengyo said, isn't it just a phone call? Taking out his mobile phone, Kinzu dialed Stella while paying attention to the situation in the sky. What, golden eagles attacked the ranch? After listening to Kinzu's narration, Stella did not hesitate and said directly, "Clean, as long as anyone breaks into the ranch without permission and endangers your safety, even if it is someone from the White House, you can directly shoot them." "Okay, I feel relieved with your words." Kinzu heard this, smiled and thanked him, and wanted to hang up the phone. But at this time, Stella suddenly said, "By the way, Clean, are you free this weekend?" I should be free, what's wrong?" Kinzu was a little stunned when he heard this. "No way, I just called you and you came to me for something?" As if she had guessed Kinzu's thoughts, Stella chuckled twice. "It's like this, Clean, there will be a cocktail party at the Revere Town government on the weekend. Someone will send you the invitation tomorrow. I'm just telling you now." "Oh, okay, I will definitely be there at the time." After smiling and exchanging a few more pleasantries, Kinzu put down the phone and waved to Dale. "Shoot it down, dead or alive." "Okay, boss, I won't let you down." As he said that, Dale placed the cannon on the flower bed, half crouched on the ground, and began to aim. The animal instinct made the golden eagle feel that there was danger coming. After all, they were already a little frightened, and they climbed up even more desperately. But all this was in vain under the scope of the heavy sniper rifle, because its range reached a terrifying 2,000 meters. Bang! With a slight and low sound, a tongue of fire rushed out from the flame suppressor on the top of the cannon, and in the blink of an eye, it hit a bird of prey soaring in the sky. There was no shrill scream. After a gunshot, a ball of fire ignited directly in the sky in the distance, and it was falling silently. Cry. At this time, a slightly sharp scream sounded. The remaining golden eagle screamed in fear after witnessing the fate of its companion, and quickly fled away. "Boss, it's running too fast." Dale stood up and shook her head helplessly. It was easy to climb up, but it was really hard for her to aim at it when escaping so quickly from a long distance in the sky. "Let's go, let's catch up quickly, haha, it hasn't come back yet." Holding his automatic rifle, Kinzu turned around and walked downstairs. Dale and Erica also quickly packed up their things and followed. Only Kin's father and Li Jianhua were left standing there with guns, looking at each other. What about the actual combat? What about the practice? A shot, and it's over? But Kinzu really couldn't take care of the two of them now. After he went downstairs, he ran towards the garage. When Dale and Erica came down, Kinzu had already driven the night out. "Hurry up and get in the car. We have to hurry." Dale and Erica didn't hesitate. After getting in the car, they quickly set up their sniper rifles. As long as there is a slight chance, I believe they will pull the trigger without hesitation. There is such a big noise in the villa, it is impossible for others not to hear it. Kinzu had just left for a while, and several rapid brake sounds were heard at the door of the villa. Before Kin's father and mother could figure out what was going on, Aya and Ween rushed in with several female bodyguards. "What are you doing?" Seeing so many people holding guns, Kin's mother was frightened, and her voice trembled. "Old lady, what happened just now?" "We heard gunshots." After I saw that there was nothing wrong in the house, she was relieved. Seeing that everyone was a little nervous, she quickly waved her hand and signaled the female bodyguards to withdraw. After the female bodyguards had gone out and Aya and Ween had put away their guns, Kin's mother finally breathed a sigh of relief and said in confusion, "I don't know why I have been here all the time." As she spoke, Kin's mother glanced at Kin's father, and the meaning was the same. "What happened just now?" Fortunately, at this time, Zumengyo, who had comforted Pape, heard the sound and walked down from upstairs quickly. She told Aya and Ween about the situation just now. After listening to Zumengyo's narration, Aya and Ween looked at each other in bewilderment. Is this right? Big Bird used a heavy sniper. However, the two women did not say anything. After apologizing, they also quickly retreated. When they got outside, they left 2 female bodyguards to guard the door, and after sending the rest back, the 2 women got into their own car and rushed towards the direction of the mountains. There was no way. They would not feel at ease if they did not see Kinzu with their own eyes. As for the phone, well, they were used to using walkie-talkies, so they were really not used to using the phone. As luck would have it, Dale and Erica, urged by the beautiful ladies did not even bring their walkie-talkies. After all, it was just a bird hunt, not a mission. Aya and the others left without hesitation, but the shot they brought to Keen's father, mother, and Keenwan was far from over. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 839. Night enters the mountain. Imagine that when you were in your room, several armed men break into the room. What would your reaction be? Others may not know, but Mother Keen and Father Keen were indeed frightened. But at the same time, she was a little shocked. I say, Lago Keen, are these people our son's bodyguards? Mother Keen sat on the table and sofa, looking at Father Keen beside her, feeling as if she were in a dream. She always knew that her son was rich and that he was very capable now. But now, looking at so many armed bodyguards, Mother Keen felt a little proud in addition to being frightened. It should be, ask Yo-Oh, she should know. Father Keen was also a little unsure. He grew up in a country that banned guns, and suddenly saw so many people with guns. He still needed to digest it. Hearing Keen's father talking about herself, the beautiful ladies who had just come in, sat down next to Keen's mother very obediently and said with a smile, Auntie, you're right. Those people just now are Kinzu's bodyguards, but not all of them came. She has several bodyguards guarding around the ranch. Ah, there are more. Keen's mother was a little surprised. She turned her head to look at Keen's father and sighed. It seems that the United States is really unsafe, otherwise why would our son hire so many bodyguards? That's not the case. Before others spoke, Keenru interrupted. Like her mother, she was full of pride after the initial shock. However, compared with Keen's mother, she has been exposed to the internet and obviously knows more about this. The reason why my brother hired so many bodyguards is because he is rich. Look at those rich people in the country. Who has more bodyguards than my brother? That's true. Keen's father nodded in agreement. Zumengyu waited until everyone had finished expressing their feelings, and then she smiled and explained the origins of Kinzu's bodyguards. Now, everyone was stunned. Not to mention Keen's father and mother, even Kinru, the little girl who admired her brother so much, didn't believe it at this time. There was no way. From childhood to adulthood, Kinzu had never shown any potential to treat illnesses and save lives. However, at this moment, Kinzu was unaware of the discussion in the villa. Now he was stepping on the accelerator frantically, controlling the Night the 15th at a speed of nearly 200 yards per hour, running on the vast pasture. You know, this is not a flat highway, this is a dirt road in the pasture. There are large and small slopes and gravel everywhere. The only thing to be thankful for is that this is different from the real mountains, and there are no gullies and streams to block the road. Even so, if it were an ordinary person, he would be considered brave to drive 100 yards. What's more, Kinzu is almost driving at 200 yards. Fortunately, the people sitting in the car are not ordinary people. There is no need to say much about the two female Special Forces soldiers. Even Kinzu's reaction speed and physical strength are not comparable to those of ordinary people. Even if he faces Ryan head-on now, Kinzu is confident that he can knock him down within a minute. Boss, it still doesn't work. It's too fast. Dale, who had been aiming for a long time, put down his sniper rifle helplessly, with a hint of frustration in his tone. In this regard, Kinzu was not surprised at all, but comforted him. It's okay. This guy can sprint at a distance of 300 kilometers per hour. It's normal that he can't aim accurately. While talking, Dale's mobile phone rang. She picked it up and looked at it, and was a little surprised. It turned out to be Wing who called. The two sisters who had been chasing for a long time but couldn't see the shadow of the person finally remembered that they still had a mobile phone. Although she was surprised, Dale still answered the phone. After a few words, she covered the phone. "Boss," Wing called. She heard the gunshots and thought something happened. She asked if we need support. "No, tell her it's okay. The three of us are enough." Dale nodded. In fact, she meant the same thing, but with the big boss present, she still reported the matter first. In the car behind, Wing hung up the phone and said with a smile, "Okay, boss, nothing happened, let's go back first." Nodding, I didn't say anything, stepped on the brakes, and turned the steering wheel. Suddenly, this not too luxurious black Ford off-road vehicle drifted on the pasture and then drove towards the rest area. What should we do now? When night the 15th arrived at the foot of the mountain, Kinzu was a little dumbfounded. Now there is no sign of Hawa, which means they still have to go into the mountains. But now there is no horse to come, can't really drive the car in. He doesn't have the skills to do that. After opening the door, the three of them got out of the car. Dale looked around at the terrain, then looked up at the sky, and finally looked at Kinzu. "Boss, the car can also be driven in, but I guess you will have to do a major overhaul after you come back." Kinzu heard this without even hesitating, and waved his hand. "Get in the car, it's your turn to drive." Dale nodded, sat firmly in the driver's seat, fastened his seatbelt, and turned his head to look at the two people in the back seat. "For safety reasons, fasten your seatbelts." Kinzu and the other two did not hesitate, and fastened their seatbelts when the night the 15th started. Although he had prepared himself mentally, it was not until the night the 15th really drove into the mountains that Kinzu realized what off-road meant. Damn, such a big ditch, relying on the performance of the car, it rushed directly through. Damn, the distance between the two trees was obviously too big for the car to pass, but Dale hit it hard. Well, Kinzu finally understood why Dale said at the beginning that the car would have to be overhauled after going out. This guy is just driving a car like a tank. At this time, Kinzu was full of relief. Fortunately, this is an armored off-road vehicle, otherwise, with Dale's driving style, the car would have been destroyed and people would have died. However, hard work often means rewards. As the old saying goes, there is gain only if you give up. How can you gain without giving up? Well, although it is usually the case that you lose both the wife and the army. But isn't this the truth? Just when Kinzu was feeling sorry for his beloved car, he heard a few shrill eagle cries from afar. "Hurry, hurry up, I hear the sound." Kinzu's heart skipped a beat and he hurriedly shouted to Dale in front of him. As for Dale, this woman didn't even turn her head, but instead reminded loudly, "Boss, sit tight first." As he was talking, Kinzu felt that the whole car was suspended in the air. Looking through the car window glass, his heart almost jumped out. This crazy woman. Chapter 840. Golden Needle surrenders. "Dale, do we have a grudge against each other?" The car landed, Kinzu grabbed the door handle, and looked at the stream behind him with some fear. This crazy girl actually drove the car directly over the stream. "Don't worry, boss, just sit tight." Dale didn't care about this at all, and controlled Night the 15th to continue driving along the path in the woods. The screams became louder and louder, and Kinzu's heart became more and more nervous. He couldn't help but urge, "Faster, faster, drive faster." Dale rolled her eyes and didn't say anything, but she had already stepped on the accelerator to the bottom. Soon, several entangled black dots in the sky appeared in Kinzu's sight. However, after seeing it clearly, Kinzu's heart suddenly relaxed. "Hey, boss, it seems you don't have to worry." Dale stopped the car and showed a few smiles on her face. Yes, the Harpy Eagle is indeed the king of single combat. Erica agreed with a smile, pushed open the car door and walked down. When Kinzu got out of the car, the two had already raised their guns. "Boss, do you want to shoot?" Looking at the inquiring eyes of the two, Kinzu shook his head slightly. Because at this moment in the sky, this guy, faced 3 golden eagles, and he was not at a disadvantage. Just as Kinzu and the others were watching, the Harpy Eagle in the sky suddenly stretched out its legs and grabbed the wings of a golden eagle fiercely. This was not a light blow. The unfortunate golden eagle instantly lost its combat power and fell down screaming. The remaining two are not idle either. Taking advantage of this opportunity, their sharp eagle beaks also greeted the Harpy Eagle. However, to their surprise, such a sharp eagle beak, pecking on the Harpy Eagle, only pulled off a few hairs. Seeing that the situation was not good, the two guys turned their heads and wanted to escape. Unfortunately, it was too late. Ha suddenly flapped his wings, drew a beautiful arc in the air, and then suddenly accelerated and dived towards a golden eagle. Cry, cry, after only 2 quick eagle cries, the golden eagle lodged by Ha followed in the footsteps of its companions and fell down screaming. The last golden eagle was so scared that it fell to the ground obediently without Ha attacking it, and its body trembled from time to time. In the animal world, the stronger the king. As long as you are stronger than it, it will choose to obey. The reason why they dared to retaliate this time was because Ha and his wife were rescued by King Zhu last time, not by themselves. So they were not convinced, so they kept thinking about it, and when their injuries were healed, they hurried to retaliate. Let's go and take a look. Motioning the two to follow, King Zhu stepped towards the direction where the golden eagle fell. Kui, Ha whistled in the air, circled twice, and then slowly landed. King Zhu whistled and stretched out his arms. Ha was really obedient, landing directly on King Zhu's shoulder, shaking his body and cleaning himself. King Zhu, who was looking at this guy with a smile on his face and wanted to praise him, froze his smile. Purr. Purr. Turning his head, King Zhu wiped a handful of bird feathers from his face with the sound of his hand, feeling depressed. Boss, your makeup is really good. Dale, who had put away his gun, couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw this, and praised him with a smile. Erica was much more bold than Dale, giggling and taking out a mobile phone to take 5 consecutive photos of King Zhu. Now, King Zhu's depression became more serious. He turned his head and wanted to scold him, but he happened to face the very funny front face of the eagle. He swallowed the words back when they came to his lips. There is no way. This guy's little head is just like the bald eagle. You can only look at it from the side. Because these two guys look like Wukilong from the side. They are handsome. But when you look at them from the front, they look like Panchangjiang, which makes you want to laugh. If you don't believe it, go and look at the bald eagle, the national bird of the United States. Whether it is on the flag or the badge, this guy always has a side face, and never asks for a frontal photo. Shaking his head, King Zhu couldn't do anything about this guy, but he still had a way to deal with his men. He glared with his eyes, "Come and help me clean it up." "Here I come." Resisting a smile, Erica took out a tissue from her arms and helped King Zhu clean up the blood and feathers on his face. Of course, these are all left by the golden eagle. Our protagonist today is not hurt at all. Please ignore those few barely noticeable feathers. After packing up, several people walked quickly towards the direction where the golden eagle landed. The first one they found was the golden eagle that was not injured and landed on its own initiative. After this guy saw King Zhu, it should be after seeing Ha on King Zhu's shoulder. He lost the momentum of a king in the sky. He just squatted in an open space, with his head drooping, as if he was ready to be picked. Sweat, King Zhu was a little distressed. Well, I just hope this guy is not a female, otherwise Ha will probably fight when he goes back. Cough, cough, King Zhu straightened his face after 2 dry coughs, and began to think about how to deal with these guys. Kill. It's a pity. Hand it over to the pet shelter in the town. This can be considered. Cry. Just when King Zhu was entangled, Ha on his shoulder suddenly burst into a loud eagle cry. King Zhu frowned and rubbed his ears. Just as he was about to speak, he saw the golden eagle, which was squatting on the ground, crawled down directly. Well, anyone can see this posture. This is admitting defeat. Seeing this, King Zhu understood a little. Turning his head to look at Ha who was holding his head high on his shoulder, King Zhu asked tentatively, "Do you mean that it listens to you now?" As if he understood what King Zhu said, Ha nodded his little head and whispered a few times at the golden eagle on the ground. The golden eagle, which was originally lying on the ground, stood up swayingly. With his short legs, this guy staggered to King Zhu's feet and rubbed his little head on his calves. King Zhu shuddered in his heart and almost threw Ha out. What a joke! If this guy hit his thigh like this, he would have to recuperate for 10 days or half a month if he didn't break a bone. Looking at the golden eagle still rubbing against his calf, King Zhu managed not to jump away. He turned his head and stared at Ha on his shoulder, thinking, "Ha, I just believed you for once today. If anything happens to me, I will definitely stew you." The author has a headache today and has eye cramps. This is just one update. The rest will be posted tomorrow. It's time to go to bed. Chapter 841. It's easy to get into the mountains, but hard to get out. Fortunately, the golden eagle was probably not really scared. Apart from rubbing Kinzyu's thigh in a flattering manner, it did not make any other movements. Seeing this, Kinzyu breathed a sigh of relief and slowly squatted down, placing his big hand on the golden eagle's drooping head. Obviously, Kinzyu felt the golden eagle's body tremble slightly. However, it did not struggle, and just handed its most vulnerable part to Kinzyu's hand. Now, as long as he exerted a little force, this former overlord of the sky would disappear from this world. Okay, you just follow Haha from now on. If you dare to be dishonest again, I will stew you directly. Releasing his hand, Kinzyu stood up with a smile, turned around and went to look for the remaining 2 golden eagles. Haha stood on Kinzyu's shoulder, turned his head, and cooed a few times at the golden eagle on the ground. The golden eagle, which was still lying on the ground, stood up swayingly after hearing Haha's cry. After shaking his messy wings, he ran a few steps on the ground, kicked his legs, and spread his golden wings suddenly, and flew into the blue sky again. Kinzyu just looked back, stroked Haha's little head with his hand, and said nothing. He believed that Haha would not let him down. With the help of Dale and Erica, the remaining 2 golden eagles were found quickly. The injured golden eagle was struggling to resist after seeing Kinzyu and his friends. However, Haha kicked his legs, jumped to the ground, and walked to the 2 guys with his strong big feet. Flutter, flutter. After a few wins, the 2 golden eagles became obedient, opened their little cross-eyed eyes and looked at Kinzyu pitifully, like a wronged young wife. Kinzyu was a little scared by being looked at, so he directly exchanged 2 drops of spiritual liquid and quietly fed them to the 2 guys. Now it's good. The wounds are no longer bleeding, the feathers that fell off are slowly growing back, and most importantly, the lost spirit is back. Looking at Haha in front of him, the 2 idiots feel eager to try. Ahem. Kinzyu coughed twice and glared at the 2 idiots. They wanted to rebel after eating my food. The 2 coughs didn't sound special to the 2 girls, but they sounded like thunder to the 2 idiots. The strong pressure made the 2 golden eagles, who had just stood up, crawl on the ground again and tremble. Once again, they felt the fear before death. Cry, cry, 2 low eagle cries announced that the 2 golden eagles surrendered without backbone. However, when Kinzyu signaled Dale and Erica to carry the 2 guys to the car and prepare to go back, he found a very serious problem. Hey, boss, it seems that we can't go back. Swallowing his saliva, Dale looked at the stream in front of him awkwardly. When he came here, he didn't feel anything when he flew down from above, but now he wants to go up. It seems a bit difficult. Kinzyu was also a little dumbfounded when he saw this. Hey, can we take a detour? It seems not. Pushing the door open and getting out of the car, Dale looked around, and shrugged helplessly after getting in the car. This stream is too long, and this place is close to the depths of the mountains. It's hard for our car to go. What should we do? Kinzyu was a little depressed. Should he just leave the car here? Although this car is not very expensive for him, he really can't bear to part with it. Notify Elsa and drive the helicopter over. Erica took out her mobile phone, but she didn't dial the number. Instead, she turned her head and looked at Kinzyu, obviously waiting for his decision. What are you waiting for? Kinzyu was so happy that he couldn't wait to say, call the Aya sisters and ask them to come over. After receiving Erica's call, the Aya sisters had just returned to the living area and were resting in their rooms. After hearing Erica's words, the 2 sisters looked at each other in surprise. What's going on? Just now they asked us to come back, and now they ask us to go to the rescue? Although they were confused, they didn't hesitate, changed their clothes immediately, and drove towards the villa. Squeak, another harsh brake sound sounded in front of the villa door. The 2 female bodyguards guarding the door immediately came forward. Aya, what did the boss say? Shaking her head, Aya didn't bother to explain so much now. After saying that she would talk about it when she came back, she walked towards the gate of the villa. However, this time she didn't break in, but knocked on the door politely. The door was opened by Eva. After seeing the Aya sisters at the door, she welcomed them in with some doubts. How is it? Is the boss okay? Aya did not hide anything. She simply told the story in front of Kin's father and mother. How did this kid drive the car into the mountains? Kin's mother complained about her son after hearing this, but she did not delay things. She said anxiously, Aya, right. You guys go and pick them up quickly. Nodding, Aya and her sister followed Zumengyo to the second floor. Knowing that the 2 girls were going to pick up Kinzyu and had to lift a car, the beautiful Zyu was very considerate and did not ask to go with them. Although she didn't have much meat on her small body, boom, hearing the faint roar of the helicopter, Kinzu's face also showed a few helpless bitter smiles. Dale, is it the same when you went out on missions before? No. Dale shook her head decisively. Just when Kinzu was about to speak, she said calmly, the things we used were all cleared by the logistics department after the war. We only need to carry the things we need. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu consciously gave up the idea of talking to this woman. Besides, before driving in, she also reminded him that it would need a major overhaul when he returned. Shaking his head, watching the sling slowly descending from the helicopter, Kinzu thought to himself that it really needed a major overhaul this time. As expected, when they returned to the ranch, looking at the night the 15th, it was no different from Iraq. The family's mouths were wide open. Ahem, Mom and Dad, what are you doing? Why don't you go cook? After 2 dry coughs, Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly and wanted to change the subject quickly. But Kin's mother didn't buy his tricks. She pulled him over and looked him up and down, her eyes red. Kinzu was really panicking now, and hurriedly said, Mom, what's wrong with you? I'm fine. What do you mean I'm fine? Mother Kin glared at her son angrily, pointing at the armored SUV that looked like it had been robbed 18 times. Look at what this car has become. Tell me, if something happens to you, what are you and your dad going to do in the future? Chapter 842a. Call from China. After being nagging and scolded by his mother for more than an hour, Kinzu finally escaped a disaster after an emergency family meeting. Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Kinzu slumped on the sofa in the living room, and complained to the beautiful Zhu with the wronged face. It was obviously Dale who drove the car. Why am I the only one being scolded? In response to Kinzu's complaint, Zhu Mengyo directly took an apple from the coffee table and stuffed it into his mouth, smiling and saying, because you're the boss. Kinzu had to vent his frustration on the big apple in front of him. After taking a big bite, he remembered that there were 3 more mouths to feed at home, and said helplessly, fortunately, my mother didn't know that there were 3 more mouths to feed at home, otherwise I don't know what to do. Speaking of this, Zhu Mengyo asked with some concern, you brought those 3 guys back, what if they accidentally hurt someone? Chewing the apple in his mouth, Kinzu was a little unsure for a moment. After all, it is not his pet. Although it looks very docile now, Kinzu still feels insecure. Let's do this. After throwing the half-eaten apple to Betty, who was drooling, Kinzu made up his mind. Let's find a rope and tie them to the roof for a few days to see how they behave. Zhu Mengyo nodded in agreement, but looking at Betty squatting on the floor chewing an apple, she said dissatisfiedly, didn't we agree not to give it food? As soon as the voice fell, before Kinzu said anything, Betty actually stood up holding the apple and ran out. It looked like someone was chasing it to snatch the apple. It was so panicked that it almost knocked out her who came in from outside. Kinzu and Zhu Mengyo looked at each other, both of them were a little bit amused. You keep feeding it while saying it's fat, how can it not be fat? Kinzu felt a little embarrassed by what his wife said. He touched his head and said a little embarrassedly, next time, I must pay attention next time, and don't give it food when I give it to Daha. Woof woof woof, hearing his master calling his name, Daha didn't care about looking for trouble with Betty, and came to Kinzu in a flash, shaking his little tail, looking like a puppy. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu waved his hand, stay away, it's not time to eat yet. Although Haha's hunting today ended in failure, the dinner was also very rich. Not only was the hare cooked by his mother herself, but she even stewed a pot of chicken soup. Hey, looking at the pot of chicken soup with a rich aroma, Kinzu had a bad premonition in his heart. Looking up, Kinzu looked at his mother who was pouring soup into the bowl of Zude Marion, swallowed his saliva, and asked with some lack of confidence, well, Mom, this chicken. What's wrong with the chicken? Is it not stewed well? Kin's mother looked at him with some doubt. No, it's not. Kinzu swallowed his saliva again. I mean, where did you get this chicken? Why is it so fragrant? Where else can it be? After Kin's mother handed the bowl of soup to Zude Marion, she smiled and said, aren't these raised by you? In the woods not far away, 2 hens and 2 roosters. After saying that, Kin's mother stopped and looked at Kinzu with some blame. You don't even know how to raise chickens. How can 2 hens raise 2 roosters? It would be strange if they don't fight every day. Will they? Kinzu was a little embarrassed when he heard it, and quickly threw the question back. Of course not. Kin's mother said unhappily, if I hadn't discovered it earlier, this little rooster would have been pecked to death. Touching his nose, Kinzu looked at the chicken soup in the pot and thought to himself, the result is almost the same. It's good that it wasn't pecked to death, but now it's in your hands, isn't it dead? However, hearing that his mother didn't touch his hen, Kinzu was relieved and began to eat heartily. After dinner, Kinzu was lying on the sofa digesting his food, but the phone on the coffee table rang. Lying on the sofa, Kinzu glanced at the phone and didn't want to get up. Turning his head to see, wow, everyone is sitting far away. After twisting around, he finally waved to his little niece who was watching cartoons and was a little fascinated. Tongton, hurry up and give the phone to your uncle. Hearing the call, although she was reluctant to leave the cute little mouse on TV, Tongton still got up and walked over here. Taking the phone from his little niece, Kinzu patted her head with satisfaction and praised her. Tongton is so good. Let's go shopping tomorrow and your uncle will give you a nice new dress, okay? Really? After all, she is a girl. When she heard about new clothes, Tongton even abandoned the cute little mouse. Absolutely true. Kinzu picked up the phone and stretched out his little finger. He knew that children love to believe this. Sure enough, seeing Kinzu's stretched little finger, Tongton happily hooked his pinky finger with him. He was still muttering in his childish voice. We'll make a promise to each other for 100 years, and whoever changes will be a puppy. Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, Kinzu smiled at Jefferson on the other end of the phone and asked, "Why are you calling me so late? Is there something wrong?" "Yes, boss." Jefferson rubbed his somewhat uncomfortable eyes, looked at the pile of information in front of him, and explained with a smile. "It's like this, I have selected a few tutors for you. When you are free, I will arrange for them to come for an interview." So fast. Looking at the time, Kinzu had a great impression of Jefferson's work efficiency. No matter what this person's character was like, just because he was so attentive to what he ordered, Kinzu felt that if he was a boss, he would definitely like this driver very much. However, these were just fleeting thoughts. After thinking for a while, Kinzu said, "How about this, the day after tomorrow morning, I'll wait for them at the ranch the day after tomorrow morning." "No problem." Jefferson agreed very straightforwardly, smiled and exchanged a few more pleasantries, then hung up the phone. Kinzu had just put down his phone, but at this moment, the phone rang again. Kin's mother glanced at him with some dissatisfaction, and asked if she was going to let people watch TV. Kinzu smiled awkwardly, reached out to pick up the phone, and looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar number on it, and couldn't help but feel a little confused. The number was from China, but it was not stored on his phone. But why did it look familiar? With a hint of doubt, Kinzu picked up the phone. "Hello, who are you looking for?" There was silence on the other end of the phone for a long time. Just when Kinzu was about to hang up, a timid female voice came. "Is it Kinzu?" Chapter 843 Borrowing Money. "Yang Ye?" Kinzu asked uncertainly, hearing the slightly hoarse voice on the other end of the phone. "Yes, it's me." Yang Ye, who was hiding in a bathroom, heard the familiar voice coming from the other end of the phone, and said excitedly and happily, "I didn't expect that you could still recognize my voice after changing the number." Kinzu was a little embarrassed when he heard this. "Did he tell you that his buddy had a crush on you?" "Why can't I forget my old classmate when I open a business?" Kinzu laughed and teased, and subconsciously raised his wrist to check the time, and was stunned. It's only 8 o'clock in the evening, which means that it's only 7 o'clock in China now. "What's wrong, calling me so early? Aren't you just to test me?" "How could it be?" Yang Yi on the other end of the phone seemed a little hesitant, and hesitated for a long time before she stuttered. Kinzu, I heard them say that you were doing well in the United States." "Not bad, just making a living." Kinzu responded casually, while guessing in his mind why this former beautiful classmate wanted to find him. Could it be that she wants to develop in the United States? Oh, right, she studied accounting in college, and it seems that it would be a good idea to come to the United States. Just when Kinzu's thoughts were a little erratic, he heard Yang Ye speaking again on the other end of the phone. "Well, Kinzu." Yes, can you lend me 1 million? I promise to pay you back." As if she was afraid that Kinzu didn't believe in her ability to repay, Yang Ye hurriedly added, "I'm about to pass the CPA exam. By then, I will be able to get an annual salary of 300,000 yuan. Soon I will be able to, no problem, give me the card number." Before she could continue, Kinzu had already agreed straightforwardly. Yang Ye was a little confused by Kinzu's reaction, and she didn't react for a while. "Agree now? Don't you want to ask me what I'm going to do?" "Oh, don't you worry that I won't pay you back. What's wrong? Is it not enough?" Seeing that there was no response from the other side, Kinzu was a little worried and couldn't help asking again. Enough, thank you, Kinzu. Yang Ye's voice was a little choked. God knows what she has been going through these days to raise this money. The repeated setbacks and the cold stares from relatives made this beautiful girl almost completely despair of this society. Don't cry. Kinzu hated to see girls cry the most. Yang Ye's crying made him feel a little helpless. What's wrong? Who bullied you? No. Yang Ye came to her senses and gradually stopped crying. She said in a decisive tone, Kinzu, thank you so much. I will pay you back as soon as possible. It's okay, don't worry. Hearing that she stopped crying, Kinzu was relieved and smiled and teased. Besides, I'm not worried. If you really can't pay it back, you can just come and work for me. Food and accommodation are provided, but wages are not paid. Perchy, after Kinzu said this, Yang Ye's mood also improved a lot. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and cursed with a smile. Kin Bai. After hanging up the phone and walking out of the bathroom, Yang Ye was stopped by a young man. Ms. Yang, how were you thinking about it? Shaking the checkbook in his hand, the man's face was full of smug smiles, and his obscene eyes kept scanning the key parts of Yang Ye. Looking at the man opposite with some disgust, Yang Ye calmed down and replied in a very cold tone. I'm sorry, Mr. Wang, I'm sorry I can't agree to your request. After that, regardless of the man's livid face, he walked away with his long legs stretched straight by jeans. Bitch, wait for me, I will make you kneel on the ground and beg me. With a livid face, the man glared at the woman who followed him and turned to walk upstairs. Walking out of this seemingly luxurious restaurant, Yang Ye felt very complicated. She didn't expect her old friend to become like this, nor did she expect that the shy boy would become her life-saving straw. Life is so wonderful. And what about Kinzu? After hanging up the phone, facing the somewhat scrutinizing eyes of Kin's father and mother, Kinzu explained with a stiff face. A classmate in China, his family encountered some difficulties, and asked me to borrow some money. After saying that, Kinzu did not hesitate, found Jennifer's phone number in the address book, and called directly. Hi, hello, this is. As soon as the call was connected, Kinzu did not wait for Jennifer to finish, and said anxiously, Jennifer, I miss Kinzu, I will give you a card number, please remember it, and transfer 1 million to you, calling now. After making sure that the other party heard what he meant clearly, Kinzu hung up the phone with a snap, and honestly came to the sofa, ready to watch TV with his parents. However, what Kinzu didn't know was that by hanging up the phone like this, he offended his somewhat arrogant personal assistant. Women, especially beautiful women, whether they are foreign or domestic, don't like the feeling of being ignored. Although you keep pestering her, she will be very arrogant and roll your eyes at you, and may even arrogantly call you a stinky hooligan. But if you keep ignoring her, she will feel uncomfortable. At this moment, Jennifer, who was leaning on her big bed, holding the phone with her delicate neck and a notebook in her hand, was such a beauty. Hearing the busy tone coming from the microphone, this blonde and blue-eyed foreign horse was embarrassed and annoyed. She couldn't help but throw the notebook with the card number in her hand. Fuck, damn it, am I so annoying? She got out of bed and went to the bathroom. She took off her thin pajamas and looked at her curvy figure in the mirror. No change, still so beautiful. Jennifer, who was more and more narcissistic, thought of her hateful boss and was even more angry. What kind of boss is this? He didn't even bother to say a word to her. Am I so shameful? However, although she had already torn herself into pieces in her heart, this boss who not only understood the style but also had no gentlemanly manners. But Jennifer didn't dare to neglect his orders. She hurried out of the bathroom, took out her work computer, and began to work. Yang Ye. Jennifer curled her lips in disdain as she muttered this obviously girl's name. I don't know which lover she gave living expenses to again. However, why did she have a sour taste in her disdainful expression? Chapter 844 1 million? Well, Kinzu certainly couldn't guess what your girl was thinking at this moment. When he came to the sofa, he was very depressed to find that Betty had actually taken his place. This, really, how could this be tolerated? So, Kinzu pushed Betty, who was lying in the arms of the beautiful Zhu and snoring comfortably, down with his butt. Orwu. Orwu. Betty, who was lying on the carpet, was a little dazed by the sudden attack, and got angry at the crystal chandelier on the ceiling. Woof woof woof. Seeing this, the brothers Gahe and Zhao, who were lying on the side, couldn't help but laugh loudly. Little guy, you think you're great just because you can climb on the sofa, but now you've been punished, right? You just know how to mess around with them. Zhu Mengyo, who was watching TV, turned around and rolled her eyes at Qin Zhu, then stood up and helped Betty up, patted its round little head, and said with a smile, "Go to bed quickly." Turning her head to look at the two little guys who were grinning, Zhu Mengyo didn't say anything. "You two, why don't you go to bed?" The two pairs of little guys who were gloating were stunned for a moment. How could innocent people be affected? However, looking at the serious expression of the hostess, the two pairs of little guys could only look at each other helplessly, and climbed up reluctantly and walked towards their own nests. As for what they thought in their hearts, no one cared. Instead, Qin's father and mother were reminded of some troubles by Qin Zhu's words just now. "Xiao Zhu, I saw that you just lent out 1 million yuan. Can you get the money back?" Qin's father rarely lit a cigarette in front of the family. While smoking, he sighed helplessly. "It's not that Dad is saying anything to you. Now, if you lend money out, you really have to look at people carefully." Qin Zhu laughed when he heard it. Hearing this tone, the old man now has a deep understanding. In fact, Qin Zhu knew why without saying it, but he still cooperated and asked a question. "Dad, what's wrong? Look at you, are you going to get the money back after you lend it out?" This time it was Qin's mother's turn to sigh. She said with some self-blame, "It's all my fault. Your dad didn't agree at the beginning, but I was soft-hearted and lent the money out. The money is nothing." Qin's father waved his hand indifferently. "Xiao Zhu is not a person who is short of money now. The main thing is that your nephew's words are really irritating." "Nephew?" Qin Zhu asked with some confusion. "Mom, where did you get your nephew? What are you talking about?" Qin's mother glared at Qin Zhu fiercely. "What's wrong with Mom having a nephew?" I don't mean anything else." Qin Zhu waved his hands repeatedly and looked at Zhu Mengyo beside him, feeling a little helpless. "He's not really a biological nephew. He's the child of your mother's cousin and doesn't get to know each other much." Qin's father saw this and explained. Qin Zhu became even more depressed when he heard this. "So you know you're not familiar with him, but you still lend him money?" As if he had guessed what Qin Zhu was thinking, Qin's father smiled bitterly and said, "What can we do? Everyone knows that you have money. They came to our house and said that they were having trouble with their business and wanted to borrow 200,000 yuan to make ends meet. They were also willing to mortgage their house." Qin's father didn't say anything else, but Qin Zhu had understood. It must be that Qin's mother didn't feel comfortable letting them take over their house, but now they didn't want to pay back the money. There was really nothing we could do. Sure enough, Qin's mother sighed again. Who would have thought that after not seeing her for a few years, she would become like this? Qin Zhu touched his nose and saw that the two elders were in a bad mood, so he smiled and said, "Okay, it's no big deal, 200,000 is not much, just take it as a chance to see a person clearly." "That's right." Qin's father nodded and said, "Let's be more careful in the future, and try not to lend money if we can." Qin's mother could only nod helplessly, but she changed the subject and looked at Qin Zhu and said, "Xiao Zhu, Mom knows that you are rich now, but you can't spend it carelessly. It's 1 million, and you didn't even ask, and you just lent it out." Qin Zhu's head was a little big, and he looked at Zhu Mengyo for help. But this time, the beautiful Zhu ignored him, so he could only look at his sister and brother-in-law again. After all, the elder sister loves her younger brother. Seeing this, Qin Wan quickly chimed in. "Mom, Xiao Zhu has his own ideas. Besides, it's only 1 million. For him, it's just the gas money for a trip to the sea. It's no big deal." The eldest daughter has spoken, and the future daughter-in-law is watching. Mother Qin can't blame her son too much. This matter can only be left as it is. However, for Qin Zhu, this matter has just begun. Late at night, in the bedroom. After the big bed shook from side to side twice as if it could not bear it, the two who had been tossing and turning for half a night finally embraced each other and calmed down. Lying on the soft big bed, Qin Zhu was slightly panting. He didn't know why, but Zhu Mengyo was particularly enthusiastic tonight, and he almost couldn't resist. Just as Qin Zhu was intoxicated by this wonderful aftertaste, the beautiful lady Zhu, who was resting in his arms, suddenly asked, "Who is Yang Ye?" Qin Zhu, who was still a little confused, answered subconsciously, "A high school classmate." Her, male or female? It seemed that she had gotten the answer she wanted. Although Zhu Mengyo was still asking, a smug smile had already appeared at the corner of her mouth. The reason why she was so enthusiastic tonight was for this moment. It is said that people are most likely to tell the truth when they're relaxed, and she was very satisfied with this. A female. Qinzhu also came back to his senses at this time, and smiled and patted the beautiful lady in his arms on the buttocks. What, are you jealous? Who is jealous? Zhu Mengyo curled her lips and said indifferently. Besides, it's your money, not mine. What do you mean by yours and mine? Qinzhu tightened his arms and said with a smile. Isn't mine yours? Being held like this by Qinzhu, the familiar sense of security came over her again. Zhu Mengyo smiled with satisfaction, her lips slightly curled, and said very cutely, isn't it just 1 million? Even if it's my money, I don't mind. However, what Zhu Mengyo didn't know was that this money was really more than 1 million. Well, maybe even if she knew, she really wouldn't mind. After all, she has never been short of money since she was a child. But the two of them didn't care, but some people couldn't help but care. Especially Anya, who returned to the hospital. When she took out her mobile phone and saw the SMS message sent by the bank, her head buzzed, and her mind was blank. How could this happen? Thanks to Don't Puppet for the reward of 500 starting coins, thanks to Think About Counterattack for the reward of 1000 starting coins, thanks to I Want to Wake Up to the World, Anticipation, The Best Is Like Water, BA, Sankam, and several other great people for their rewards and support. Liu Yun is very grateful. Recently, heavy snow has been falling in various places, so book friends, please keep warm. Chapter 845 6,300,000. 6,300,000. Looking at the text message in her hand, Yanya was a little confused. Because she actually received a remittance of up to 6,300,000 RMB. Who is it? Is it him? The first person that flashed in Yanya's mind was Qinzhu. After all, she had just asked him to borrow money. But she borrowed 1 million, why did he give her 6 million? Could it be, Yang, who has always been known for her cleverness, did not react this time because of the exchange rate, but thought of what Qinzhu said just now? If you really can't pay it back then, come and work for me. Work for him? As if she thought of something, Yang's heart was jumping and her pretty face was slightly hot. No. Shaking her head, Yang, with slightly red cheeks, forced herself to dispel the weird thoughts in her heart. She is not a vain girl, otherwise she would not have contacted Qinzhu for so long after knowing his wealth. If it wasn't because her mother suddenly fell ill and was hospitalized, and she really couldn't borrow money, she wouldn't have thought of Qinzhu. But now Qinzhu's reaction made her a little confused. Picking up the phone, after a little hesitation, she called Qinzhu. She wanted to ask what was going on. However, when she called, Qinzhu was busy with work. In addition, the phone happened to be pressed under the quilt. How could he hear it? Not to mention that he couldn't hear it. Even if he heard it, Qinzhu would not answer it at this time. So after calling twice, Yanya gave up in frustration. Looking at the text message on the phone again, Yanya gritted her teeth and didn't care. Now that the money is in hand, my mother's condition can be treated. At this moment, a fat nurse in a white coat suddenly came to the door of the ward and shouted, "Is that family of patient no? 27, no. 27 here? Yes, I am." Yanya came back to her senses and quickly agreed. Is it time to change the medicine? The fat nurse glanced at Yanya, with a little impatience in her expression. There's no money in the card. If you don't pay, the medicine will be stopped. Although the woman's attitude was not good, Yanya could only smile helplessly. There was no way, who made her have no money. However, thinking of the 6 million quietly lying in her card, Yanya's flustered heart suddenly calmed down. I know, I'll go now. Is doctor's here? The fat nurse looked at Yanya in surprise, wondering why this girl was so calm. Did she raise the money? Thinking of this, her face also eased. After all, those who have money are the masters these days. I'm here. I'm in the office on the 2nd floor. If you need to find her, I'll call her for you. Thank you. No thanks. Yanya waved her hand. I'll go find her myself after I pay the money. After saying that, she ignored the somewhat mercenary fat nurse and turned toward downstairs to the payment hall. In the early morning, the sky was still so blue, but it was snowing heavily. When Qinzhu lazily got out of the bed and pulled open the curtains in his pajamas, a thick layer of snow had already accumulated outside. It's snowing again. It seems that today's trip will be ruined again. Shrugging his shoulders, Qinzhu was no longer as enthusiastic about the snow as he was at the beginning. He pulled the curtains casually and got into the bed quickly, wanting to stay in bed for a while. But Zhu Mengyo, who was woken up by him, forced herself to get up. Don't sleep anymore, get up quickly. After lazily stretching her waist, Zhu Mengyo pulled the quilt off Qinzu at some amusement. You get up the last one every day, aren't you afraid of being laughed at? What's the matter? Qinzu didn't care about it. He stared at the spring light in front of him with shining eyes, and swallowed his saliva again. Damn hooligan. She rolled her eyes at him coquettishly, picked up her clothes to cover her spring light, and ran into the bathroom. TSK, this girl is getting more and more attractive. Qinzu smacked his lips, laughed strangely, got up and chased after her. After a while of playing, when Qinzu and the others came downstairs, except for the cold breakfast, there was no one in the huge living room. Hey, where are they? Qinzu looked around and couldn't help but feel a little strange. Zhu Mengyo, who was following him, looked outside after hearing the words. Maybe they went outside to see the snow? Or Betty, who crawled out of the nest after hearing the sound, raised her head and growled a few times, as if responding to Qinzu's question. You lazy guy, you are the only one who is still sleeping. Reaching out and tapping Betty's round little head, Qinzu scolded with a bad smile. Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, someone next to him said something. Yes, there is a saying that goes, if you are not from the same family, you will not enter the same door. You are lazier than your master. Qinzu was not happy when he heard this. Hey, yo, you have to explain clearly, how am I lazy? Well, you're not lazy. Zhu Mengyo nodded her head, as if she had made a mistake. It's just that I'm always the last one to get up, so I'm not really lazy. Qinzu retreated directly, shook his head, and didn't argue with her anymore. He went into the kitchen to heat up the breakfast. Didn't the ancients say that only women and villains are difficult to raise? Let's not be so stubborn as women. After breakfast, the two of them and the bear walked out of the villa together. Sure enough, King's father and mother were standing under the porch not far away with their hands in their pockets, smiling at the few people playing in the snow. Except for Li Jianhua, who was a little reluctant and didn't join the battle, Qin Wan and Qin Ru, accompanied Tongton and Lily, plus a few little guys, all had a blast in the snow. Shaking his head helplessly, Qinzu walked to his parents and said with a smile, "It's so cold outside, why don't you stay indoors?" "What's so good about staying indoors?" Qin's father shook his head and looked at the people playing outside, his face full of happy smiles. "It's been a long time since I saw such heavy snow. I think it was only once when we were young that our family hit such heavy snow. Yes, this snow is really like goose feathers." Qin's mother reached out to catch a falling snowflake, and her smile was also very bright. Seeing this, Qinzu didn't say anything, brought a bench, and accompanied them to enjoy the snow. However, the good times didn't last long. Just when Qinzu turned his head to talk to his father, he felt a slight sound of breaking through the air next to him. Startled, he subconsciously reached out to block it. Qinzu only felt a burst of coldness all over his body, and he shivered. Hit it, I hit it. A cheering voice came, letting Qinzu understand what was going on. At the same time, he also understood who the culprit was. Qinru, stop right there, si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinis fuetzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 846 Interviewing a Tutor. After playing with the others for a while, Qinzu left. Although it was snowing today, he still had his own things to do. If you don't go out because of the snow, then you won't be able to do anything in Boston throughout the winter. Well, of course, except shopping. After all, that is purely an outdoor sport. After changing his clothes, Qinzu called Ryan and Simon respectively. Soon, Ryan's sturdy body appeared in front of the villa. "Hi, boss, is there anything I can help you with?" After getting off the horse, Ryan shook off the broken snow on his body and strode in. "Of course, buddy, I have something to trouble you today." Shrugging his shoulders, Qinzu picked up the teapot and brewed him a cup of tea, smiling and motioning him to sit on the sofa for a while. "Oh, I'm honored." With an exaggerated exclamation, Ryan took the teacup with both hands, tilted his head back, and drank it directly in big gulps. "Oh, it's so comfortable." After drinking a cup of hot water, Ryan felt his whole body warm up. Qinzu just smiled. He had been in the United States for so long that he had become accustomed to it. Talking about the culture of drinking tea with these foreigners. Don't be ridiculous. It's a compliment to say that they're like cows chewing peony. Hi, boss, good morning. With a somewhat deep voice, Simon also pushed the door and walked in. Hi, Ryan, you are here too. After entering the room, Simon found Ryan sitting on the sofa and greeted him with a smile. Come on, sit down first. Seeing that everyone was there, Kinzu didn't keep it a secret anymore and said with a smile, go replace the anti-skid belt for the pickup truck later, and tow my Cavalier to the car dealership in town to see if it can be repaired there. I'm afraid it won't work. When Ryan heard about this, he shook his head first. Boss, he definitely can't repair an armored off-road vehicle like yours. Then ask him to help me contact him. Kinzu spread his hands in a very bachelor's way. I don't have time to deal with this, I'll leave it to you two. Both of them were a little stunned. What was going on? However, since the boss had spoken, they had no choice but to go. Ryan and Simon looked at each other helplessly and nodded in agreement. Okay, boss, I'll try my best. Although they were mentally prepared, when they saw night the 15th, they didn't recognize it. Ryan pointed at the car in front of him that was no longer recognizable, and his tongue was a little tied. Simon was even more direct, looking at Kinzu with some heartache. Boss, even if you're angry, you can't use the car to vent your anger. What a pity. Kinzu touched his nose and shrugged awkwardly. It's nothing, I just drove the car to the mountains for a stroll, and it turned out like this. The two are collectively speechless. After watching Simon drive the night the 15th onto the trailer, and then the two of them drove the pickup truck all the way away from the ranch, Kinzu returned to the villa with peace of mind. In fact, the damage to the night the 15th was not that serious. It was just rubbed beyond recognition by branches and trees. That's why Kinzu didn't go back to the original factory, but wanted them to try to see if they could repaint it. In the afternoon, Kin's father and mother took the family to the family theater to watch a movie. Only Kinru was left behind by Kinzu. Brother, what do you want to do? Sitting on the sofa opposite Kinzu, Kinru stared at Kinzu with a vigilant look, fearing that he would suddenly pounce on him, to avenge the morning. Silly girl, sit down. After glaring at the girl unhappily, Kinzu looked at the time and said, I have nothing to do today, so I'll interview an English teacher for you to save you from playing all day in the future. Looking for a teacher now. When she heard that she was going to find a teacher, Kinru pouted her lips subconsciously and looked at Kinzu reluctantly. It's no use looking at me. Ignoring his sister's pitiful look, Kinzu took out his mobile phone and called the female bodyguard guarding the ranch gate. Hasn't the person arrived yet? Boss, they are already here, and Ween is leading them there. Okay, I got it. After hanging up the phone and looking at his watch, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction. They are all on time. Not long after, Ween, who was wearing a black leather jacket and leather pants and a pair of high heels on her jade feet, came in carrying a blonde girl. Boss, this is the first one today, Whitney Nora, a graduate of the University of California. After saying this to Kinzu, Ween, the little godling, did not stay for long. She turned around and walked out with her slender waist twisted, leaving the huge living room to the three of them alone. Whitney, right. Please sit down. Waving his hand, Kinzu motioned the blonde girl with freckles on her face to sit on the sofa opposite him. Yes, Mr. Clean, I'm Whitney. Whitney came to the sofa nervously and sat down carefully. Don't be nervous, let's just chat casually. Seeing that the other party was a little nervous, Kinzu smiled and waved his hand. His expression was very calm. But, how could she not be nervous? When Whitney received this part-time job invitation, she was still a little proud. After all, she was a pure American citizen, and she was going to teach a nation to learn English. If Kinzu didn't pay enough, she really didn't want to come. Although she came, she didn't say it, but she must be a little arrogant in her heart. However, when she arrived at the gate to the ranch, looking at the heavily guarded gate, her heart was a little nervous. Especially after more than 10 minutes of driving, when the car stopped in front of a luxurious villa, the pride in her heart had long disappeared without a trace. She is an American citizen, yes. But she knows that this is a capitalist country. Here, the green Franklin is more useful than anything else. And now sitting in front of her is a person who owns many Franklins. Miss Whitney, I wonder how old you are this year. Kinzu saw that she was still a little bit reluctant, so he started to chat with her. Of course, Kinzu said this in Chinese. Because he was not looking for a teacher who could only speak English. If he couldn't even speak Chinese, how would he communicate? However, what disappointed him was that the blonde and blue-eyed white girl in front of him looked at him with a confused look. Obviously, she didn't understand what Qinzu was saying. Forget it. Qinzu shook his head helplessly, looked at the girl in front of him, and said with some regret, "Ms. Whitney, I don't think this job is suitable for you." Chapter 847. Acquaintance. After Whitney left in disappointment, Ween walked in with her long and slender legs, leading another girl. As soon as they entered the door, Qinzu's eyes lit up. She was 1.75 meters tall, with long hair and a pair of long legs that looked no worse than Ween's. Even her figure was like Ween's, with a hot feeling. However, the result was still the same. Qinzu shook his head helplessly and sent her out with great regret. Because her English was very good, but her Chinese was also very poor. Watching her leave in disappointment, Qinzu also smacked his lips in disappointment, which was a pity. Of course, Qinzu would arrange female bodyguards to send those who failed to apply home safely. Otherwise, there would not be so many people willing to run so far and come to such a remote place to apply. After rejecting a few more, Qinzu felt helpless. What's wrong with this guy Jefferson? What kind of people does he find? There is nothing to say about her looks and figure, but she is not suitable for teaching students. Of course, if you are looking for a secretary or something, these girls are very suitable. Ahem, I have gone off topic. Concentrating his mind, Qinzu picked up the teacup and took a sip to moisten his dry throat. Next. When Ween brought the last girl up, Qinzu was really stunned. It was not because of how beautiful she was, although she was also beautiful. It was not because of how good her figure was, although she was also hot. But because this girl looked so familiar. Mr. Clean, we meet again. Pursing her thin lips, the girl opposite looked a little excited. This, Qinzu put away his astonished eyes, thought carefully, and asked uncertainly, You are Sayu? He had a vague impression of the girl in front of him who was wearing a khaki coat and had short hair. It seemed that she was the female salesperson he met when he went to the car dealership in town to buy a car for the first time. It seems that she is an international student from China. Yes, I'm Sayu. Sayu nodded slightly, and looked at Qinzu nervously. I didn't expect that you would still remember me, Mr. Clean. It's really a surprise. How could you not remember? Qinzu laughed. Sayu, you are such a beautiful girl. I will never forget you no matter who I forget. Sayu smiled softly, revealing two beautiful dimples. Mr. Clean, you are too polite. Okay. Qinzu waved his hand and gestured with a smile. Since we are all acquaintances, let's not be polite. Sit down. Nodding, Sayu sat on the sofa opposite as he said, and put her hands on her knees nervously. Seeing that she was still a little nervous after sitting down, Qinzu raised his lips and asked with a smile, Sayu, is it okay for me to call you that? Sayu nodded slightly, and replied a little reservedly, Of course, my friends all call me that. Qinzu heard the smile on his lips, and when Sayu, who was looking at him, felt a little flustered, he asked again. By the way, Sayu, I remember you were about to graduate, right? Yes, I will graduate in July this year. How is it? Have you decided where to develop in the future? Not sure yet, maybe I will return to China. The two chatted like this, and after a while, Sayu's reserved feeling gradually disappeared. Seeing this, Qinzu stopped being polite, crossed his hands in front of him, and his expression became serious. Sayu, since you are here, you should also know my requirements here, right? Of course. Sayu nodded slightly when she heard the words. Mr. Clean, you are looking for an English tutor. I think I can give it a try. Oh? Qinzu smiled. This girl looks very confident. After just a little thought, Qinzu felt relieved. Since she is an international student, she must be able to speak Chinese. There is no distance in communication with her. Moreover, she can come to study abroad and work as a salesperson in a car dealership, so her English ability does not seem to be a problem. In addition, she is still a student, so the generation gap between her and her should be smaller. Thinking of this, Qinzu nodded, waved to the younger sister who was already waiting impatiently, and asked, Xiaoru, what do you think of this sister? Sure. Qinru was obviously relieved and said with a joyful face, Let this sister teach me. The sisters just now all looked a little awkward. Qinzu was a little embarrassed. My goodness, they are all beautiful women, okay? They are all school beauties in school. Isn't it just that her Chinese is a little poor? Why is it awkward? However, since Kinru had no objection, Kinzu didn't care. Turning his head, Kinzu looked at Zhang Xiyu, who was a little nervous, and smiled. Xiyu, this is my sister Kinru. She wants to go to school here. This time, I mainly found an English tutor for her. Since she has agreed, you will be the one to teach her in the future. Thank you, Mr. Keen. Zhang Xiyu stood up excitedly, bowed slightly to Kinzu, and looked at Kinru. Hello, Miss Kinru, I hope we can get along well in the future. Seeing this, Kinzu shook his head helplessly. Okay, Xiyu, don't be so polite, just call her Shiara. Turning his head and looking at his sister, Kinzu smiled and introduced. This sister Xiyu will be your English teacher in the future. Remember to be obedient, understand? I know. Nodding obediently, Kinru showed a lovely smile to Zhang Xiyu, stood up and moved closer to her. Sister Xiyu, you must take care of me more in the future. Yes, take care of me more. Kinzu echoed from the side. If there are disobedient ones, just beat them directly, don't be polite. You, puffing up her cheeks, Kinru glared at her brother with some dissatisfaction, and muttered. Bad brother, Sister Xiyu will not be as violent as you. Yes, she will only be more violent. Kinzu looked at his sister with a smile on his face and teased. If she is not violent, I will not pay her wages. Kinru looked at Kinzu speechlessly after hearing this. She wanted to ask loudly. Brother, are you sure we are born from the same mother? Zhang Xiyu watched the brother and sister bickering from the side, with an envious expression on her face. As an only child, she has longed to have a brother who loves her since she was a child. But this wish is destined to be impossible for her to realize in this life. Well, of course, except for a loved brother. Chapter 848. 1000 per hour. After agreeing on the time for the class later, Kinzu asked the female bodyguard to send Zhang Xiyu back. But Kinzu didn't slap his thigh until the female bodyguard sent her back. It seems that he didn't even mention the issue of salary. At this time, Zhang Xiyu, who was sitting on the sofa in her living room, faced the strange eyes of her parents and wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into immediately. Xiaoyu, what do you think your mother should say to you? A beautiful woman who looked to be in her 30s or 40s, dressed in home clothes, sat opposite her daughter, with a somewhat amusing expression on her face. You said you wanted to be a tutor, and your mother didn't object, but why didn't you even ask about the salary? That, didn't I forget it? Zhang Xiyu's face was a little red with shame. Today, her thoughts seemed to have been led by the man, and she was finally sent back in a daze. You can forget this. The beautiful woman pretended to faint, and said helplessly, how can your parents let you stay in the United States alone if you are like this? Oh, I will change it in the future. Zhang Xiyu, who was a little at a loss for words, simply played the unique advantages of women and hugged her mother's arm and started to whack coquettishly. In the end, it was Zhang's father who spoke up. Okay, every failure makes you wiser. I believe she will remember it in the future. I hope so. The beautiful woman looked at her daughter in her arms lovingly and shook her head and said, even if she remembers it this time, since you have agreed, even if they pay you a lower salary, you can't regret it, understand? Why? Zhang Xiyu raised her head in confusion. Because you have already promised them. Zhang's father's expression was a little serious at this time. Since you have agreed, you must do it. This is the basic principle of our Zhang family. Oh, I see. Zhang Xiyu stuck out her tongue and buried her head in her mother's arms again, thinking about today's scenes, wondering when she became so confused. Just as she was thinking, the phone in her arms suddenly rang, which scared her. Hey, it's Mr. King's call. Taking out the phone, Zhang Xiyu's expression was a little surprised. Answer it, maybe he wants to talk to you about salary. The beautiful woman shook her head, thinking how could her daughter, the boss, be so confused and only reacted this time. After answering the phone, Zhang Xiyu's little mouth opened after a while, and her expression looked a little surprised. After a while, until a busy tone sounded on the phone, she came back to her senses. What's wrong? Seeing this, the beautiful woman asked worriedly, is the salary too low? It's okay, let's just consider it a loss this time. No, it's not. Zhang Xiyu shook her head, swallowed her saliva, and replied in surprise. It's not too low, it's too high. It's just a tutor, how high can it be? Zhang's father shook his head with a smile, picked up the teacup beside him, and took a sip. Zhang Xiyu's expression was very strange, a little excited, and a little scared. Hourly wage, $1,000. Puff, Zing's father spit out a mouthful of water before he could swallow it. How much? $1,000 per hour. Zing Sayu repeated it again very seriously. Picking up the tissue beside and wiping his mouth, Zing's father had a very interesting expression. He asked in disbelief. Hourly wage, $1,000? Yes. Nodding, Zing Sayu added. There is also a special car to pick me up every day. Zing's father was already a little numb. He looked at the beautiful woman and asked in confusion. Who are you tutoring? A boy or a girl? As if knowing what her parents wanted to say, Zing Sayu rolled her eyes and said coquettishly. A 13 or 14-year-old girl, what are you thinking? The two of them just breathed a sigh of relief when they heard Zing Sayu say again. But you should have heard of his brother. He is the owner of the big manor in our suburbs, Kinzu. What? Because of their surprise, the decibels of their voices were a little high, and Zing Sayu covered her ears. After being surprised, the two asked in unison. Are you talking about the billionaire Kinzu? Are you tutoring his sister? Putting her hands down depressedly, Zing Sayu said helplessly. Yeah, what's wrong? What's wrong? Zing's father's voice rose several degrees. He is a billionaire. With just one word from him, you don't have to struggle for your whole life. Rolling his eyes, Zing Sayu reminded in a low voice. Dad, what about your principles as a human being? What principles? Can principles be compared with US dollars? Rolling his eyes, Zing's father stood up and paced back and forth in the living room, still muttering to himself. Kinzu's sister. Why does she hire a tutor? Is she going to study in the United States? Zing Sayu glared at her father with some dissatisfaction, shook her mother's arm, and said coquettishly. Mom, look at him, what is he thinking about? The beautiful woman did not join in at this time, but looked up and down at her precious daughter, wondering. Girl, is the guy interested in you? Kinzu didn't know that the average salary of a tutor he searched on the internet made the three of them imagine things. But there was nothing he could do about it. Even he was shocked when he first saw it. $1,000 an hour. What does that mean? 1 hour's salary is equivalent to one's previous month's hard work. It's true that if you compare yourself to others, you'll die, and if you compare goods to others, you'll throw them away. Shaking his head, Kinzu glared at his sister. Silly girl, I have spent a lot of money on you. If you don't study hard, I will show you how I will deal with you. TSK. Kinru curled her lips in disdain. Who knows if you are doing this for me or to pick up girls? You, Kinzu was choked with anger, looked around with a guilty conscience, and scolded. Little kid, don't say such things, or I'll beat you up. Humph. With a cold snort, the little girl stood up, shrugged her shoulders indifferently, shook her head and sighed in the tone of a little adult. I don't care about your shit, just do it yourself. After saying that, regardless of Kinzu's wonderful expression, she jumped to find other people. Looking at the little girl's lively figure, Kinzu touched his chin, wondering whether he should really talk to Zing Sayu and ask her to use some special means. There was no way. Now this girl, relying on Zhu Mengyo to protect her, is getting more and more presumptuous, and doesn't take him seriously. But before he could think it through, he heard a crispy girl cry suddenly from the roof. What's going on? Kinzu stood up with some confusion and rushed upstairs. There was the only air force of his Dekin manor. Chapter 849. Do you like my brother? After going up to the second floor, Kinzu realized that he was a little too worried. This was Haha, who had come back from hunting and was feeding a few golden eagles. Seeing this, Kinzu was a little scratching his head. Should he let those guys go? It was a bit unreasonable to always let the victor serve the defeated. Shaking his head, Kinzu entered Pape's nest again. This guy was still incubating eggs calmly. It's been so long, did you get an egg for me? After walking around upstairs, Kinzu hurried back downstairs. There was no way. It started snowing outside at some point, and it was a bit heavy. The next afternoon, Zing Sayu, who was still preparing for work at home, was taken to the ranch by Ween. Because Kin's mother felt that other students were in class, her daughter should also start studying. In this regard, although the little girl protested, she was eventually suppressed by Kin's father and mother. Looking at his little sister's aggrieved look, Kinzu laughed out loud without sympathy. Betty, who had been beaten up by Kinzu several times, joined in the fun and kept howling. Seeing her brother's appearance, Kinru was so angry. However, thinking of what might happen in a while, Kinru's mouth curled up again. Kinru's smile made Kinzu a little confused. Could it be that this girl was stupid? However, when Zhang Xiaoyu entered the villa, Qin Zhu finally understood why this dead girl laughed. In particular, when Zhang Xiaoyu sweetly called Qin Big Brother, the faces of several people sitting in the living room became strange. Qin Wan saw that the situation was not good, and quickly found an excuse to pull her husband and 2 children back upstairs. Xiao Zhu, is this the tutor you found for Ru? Watching Zhang Xiaoyu and Qin Ru went to the study, Qin's mother turned around and looked up and down at her son with a strange look. Well, yes. Qin Zhu swallowed his saliva, and had a bad feeling in his heart. Is it a tutor or a mistress? Qin's mother still had a smile on her face, but the smile was a little ugly. Qin Zhu, let me tell you, our family has some money now, but don't do those crooked things to me. I only recognize Yoa was my daughter-in-law. Qin Zhu's head was big when he heard it, especially when he saw the resentful expression on Zhu Mengyo's face on the other side. He felt even more depressed. Mom, even if this is really your son's mistress, you can't say that in front of your future daughter-in-law, right? Ahem, of course, these are Qin Zhu's inner thoughts, he dare not say that. Mom, this is really just a tutor, a salesperson I met when I bought a car last time. Qin Zhu raised his hands helplessly and explained very sincerely. Jefferson is fully responsible for this recruitment, and I don't know why she came to apply for the job. Then why did you choose her? Can't others do it? Qin's mother was a little unconvinced and continued to ask. Qin Zhu was even more depressed now. It seemed that you were going to kill him completely. However, he was really wrong this time. I didn't want to wife her, but she is the only Chinese here. If I choose an American girl, her English would be standard, but how could she communicate with my younger sister? Really? Absolutely true. Seeing that Qin Zhu's expression did not seem to be lying, Zhu Mengyo, who was standing by, also agreed. Auntie, I also believe that they have nothing to do with each other. You are too suspicious. You are just too soft-hearted. Mother Qin looked at Zhu Mengyo with some love and shook her head. This brat just needs to be beaten from time to time, so that he won't become a mess like those rich people. What do you mean by messy? Qin Zhu was a little amused by his mother's alternative adjective. However, he had to admit that the lives of rich people are indeed messy. After Qin's mother left the living room, Qin Zhu sat down next to the beautiful Zhu in silence, holding her slender waist and complaining. Is this your mother or my mother? Why do I feel like you were giving birth now? What nonsense are you talking about? She rolled her eyes at Qin Zhu. Although she was coquettish, Zhu Mengyo felt sweet in her heart. The relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law has always been a headache. Now that she has a future mother-in-law who loves her so much, what else can she ask for? Zhang Xiaoyu in the room didn't know that she almost caused a bloody storm because of herself. However, when she saw Qin Zhu had a girlfriend again, she still felt a little sorry. Of course, it was just a little bit, purely because she felt that there was one less tall, rich and handsome man in the world. Sister Xiaoyu, do you like my brother? Qin Ru, who was concentrating on copying English, suddenly asked inexplicably. What? Zhang Xiaoyu, who was a little absent-minded, was asked so suddenly that she couldn't react. I say, do you like my brother? Qin Ru put down her pen and raised her little head, looking like she soared through him. Poochie, Zhang Xiaoyu heard it clearly this time, but she didn't have the shy expression Qin Ru imagined, but suddenly laughed. What are you laughing at? Qin Ru pouted her little mouth in dissatisfaction, feeling that she seemed to have failed. You, at such a young age, don't know what to like or dislike. Putting away her smile, Zhang Xiaoyu reached out and tapped the little girl's head gently. Okay, write the English again, or I'll tell your brother. Qin Ru pouted, muttered a few words in a low voice, and continued to write English words with her head down. Boss, good news. Qin Zhu was hugging his wife in the living room, but was startled by a sudden loud voice. I say, Liam, don't you know to knock on the door first? Letting go of the big hand holding Zhu Mengyo, Qin Zhu glared at the guy with some dissatisfaction. This, scratching his head, Ryan looked at the door and answered truthfully. Boss, the door is not closed. Qin Zhu was choked and looked at the door. It seemed that it was really not closed. He couldn't help feeling embarrassed. However, as a boss, you have to be thick-skinned. Well, so Qin Zhu coughed twice and changed the subject directly. Ahem, what's the matter, what do you want to talk to me about? Fortunately, although foreigners are sometimes stubborn, they are not the kind of people without emotional intelligence. When Qin Zhu skipped this question, he didn't continue to pester him stupidly, and went along with it. Boss, good news, there is news from Philip's car dealership that they can do an overall spray painting and repair of night the 15th. Oh? Kinzu nodded, and a smile appeared on his face. What about the price? It's not cheap, right? Chapter 850 Weekend Dinner. Indeed. Ryan nodded. He was a little shocked when he talked about the price. How much? Kinzu looked at this guy with some depression. You tell me when the time comes? This, $300,000. What? Kinzu was stunned. Damn, I only spent more than $1 million to buy a new car, okay? Boss, they asked for $300,000. Ryan repeated a little embarrassedly, as if he felt a little embarrassed. Give it to them. After hesitating for a long time, although he felt very distressed, Kinzu still chose to spend the money. What else could he do? Was he really going to buy another one just to save $300,000? Okay, I'll let them start repairing it right away. Seeing that Kinzu agreed, Ryan was relieved. He didn't blame himself for his incompetence. Watching Ryan's back as he went away, Kinzu sighed in frustration and said bigly, "These guys caused me to lose 300,000 yuan. If they dare not obey, I will sue them directly." Puchi, Kinzu's money grubber look made Zumengyo beside him burst into laughter. Okay, don't feel bad. If this kind of golden eagle is in China, there may be rich people willing to spend a lot of money to buy it back. What's the use? Kinzu lazily lay on the sofa, crossed his legs, and spread his hands helplessly. These animals are protected animals. Others dare to buy them, but I dare not sell them. Who asked you to sell them? Giving this guy a blank look, Zumengyo explained. I mean, if you think about it this way, they are worth the price. You're equivalent to buying them back, so it's not a loss. Can it be like this? Time passed quickly, and it was the weekend in a blink of an eye. It was snowing outside. King's father and mother stayed in the villa all day long. Although it was a bit stuffy, they lived a comfortable life. Even King's mother's skin, under the advice of the beautiful Lady Zhu, began to take care of it, and the wrinkles on her face showed signs of disappearing. Seeing this, Qin Zhu had some new ideas. His own ranch can not only promote the growth of pasture. If some Chinese medicinal herbs are planted, will it also increase the efficacy of the medicinal herbs? For example, if it is whitening, if you grow some aloe vera yourself, will the skincare products made in this way be more effective? Of course, these are some superficial ideas, and Qin Zhu has yet to confirm them. However, there is an important thing to do now. 2 days ago, Mayor Wesley of Revere City sent him an invitation letter, inviting him to attend a cocktail party in Revere at 6 o'clock this afternoon. Well, in other words, this is a pre-election rally. That's right, it's an election. Because Wesley has been the mayor for almost 3 years, and this term is about to end. So, before the election, he gathered these influential people in the town to meet and build relationships. Of course, these were all told to him by Old York. In fact, does Qin Zhu have a big influence in Revere? Not much, there are not many people who really know him. Since he has no influence, why did Wesley invite him? Because he has money. What is an election? An election is publicity, and publicity costs money. Where does the money come from? Fundraising. So, this is one of the reasons why Wesley invited him. These banquets are really boring. Qin Zhu stood in front of the mirror, watching Zhu Mengyo help him tidy up his clothes, and shook his head helplessly. If I can't refuse, I really don't want to go. There are many people who want to go but can't. Zhu Mengyo shook her head with some amusement. Hearing her say this, Qin Zhu grabbed her hand and asked with a smile. In that case, why don't you go with me? The beautiful Zhu turned her eyes like autumn water and said cunningly. Everyone has left, who will accompany uncle and aunt? I want to stay to accompany uncle and aunt. Qin Zhu was happy and stretched out his hand to pinch her delicate little nose. You have so many reasons. Can't my sisters accompany you? After being said by Qin Zhu, Zhu Mengyo was a little speechless, and simply threw a little temper and snorted arrogantly. Anyway, I won't go. If you go, be careful. If you dare to hook up with beautiful women, I will kill you when you come back. Qin Zhu subconsciously clamped his legs together and felt a chill in a certain part of his body. Tell me, who taught you? You were not like this before. My mother taught me. Your mother? Your mother. ... Qin Zhu was still a little dazed until he got out of the door and got in the car. What's going on? My mother actually developed her gentle and virtuous daughter-in-law into a wild girlfriend. Or is it that this is actually the girl's original character, but she was led out by her mother? Shaking his head, Qin Zhu decided not to think about this terrible thing anymore, and take it one step at a time. I hope that my family status will not fall too badly. Boss, we're here. As Dale's voice fell, Kinzu realized that the car had arrived at the city government building. At this moment, the city government building was decorated magnificently, and many blonde and blue-eyed attendants shuttled back and forth, guiding the passing guests into the hall. Ha, Clean, I knew it was you. Kinzu was blocked by a wall of flesh as soon as he got out of the car. Ah, you scared me, I thought it was someone else. Kinzu laughed and hugged old Aaron in front of him, and walked towards the banquet hall accompanied by Dale. Clean, you really don't look like a billionaire. Walking behind Kinzu, old Aaron shook his head and sighed. Oh, what do you mean? Kinzu slowed down his pace and looked at him curiously. Shrugging his shoulders and revealing his fat, old Aaron smiled and said, because I haven't seen you for so long. Ah, Kinzu was a little confused. You haven't seen me. What does it have to do with whether I'm a billionaire? As if he noticed Kinzu's doubts, old Aaron started to count the fingers on his fat hands as he walked. Look, you didn't go to the party at Stella's house the day before yesterday, and you didn't go to the party at Corinne's house the day before yesterday, and you didn't go to the party at Leeson's house the day before yesterday. Ah, are there so many parties? Why don't I remember? Kinzu was a little embarrassed. How could there not be? Old Aaron was a little anxious. I saw the invitations sent out with my own eyes. Well, maybe my family put the invitations away. Kinzu smiled embarrassedly, and then he remembered that Eva seemed to have told him about this. Alas, you can't do this. Old Aaron shook his head. If you stay at the ranch all day, your social circle will only get smaller and smaller. Kinzu deeply agreed with what old Aaron said. But if you ask him to go to parties all day, he really can't adapt. Helplessly, he could only shake his head. Try your best. My family is coming over recently, and I can't leave because I'm accompanying them. Oh, your family has come in. Old Aaron stopped and said with a smile. That's perfect. When the weather gets better in a few days, come to my ranch to play. Huh. Kinzu was a little puzzled. Why don't I stay at my own ranch and come to yours? Fin est captulo much as great as Pelaga hasta el final. No esse olvidentidal like bus gosms contenido exclusivo ixo immediato. Si escrabata news to Patreon. Recurda, card alike, si escripts in Odonakin nos anima a continue. Great as a todos nos vemos on el próximo video.